jihad is not just swords, guns, bombs. That's the smaller part of it, just like the communists. The bigger part of the total war is espionage, counterintelligence, propaganda, economic warfare, psychological operations, subverting the key institutions, education, religious institutions, the media, the government, the political institutions, the security institutions.
Cultural.
Yeah. And for them, one of the big cultural penetrations is of the religious institutions. That's all part of their warfare. And for both movements, if it advances their movement, it's game. Nothing's out of bounds.
Welcome back to Going Rogue with Lara Logan. My guest on this show is a man who I've been following for more than a decade, actually. He's kind of unusual because long before people knew what cancel culture was, he'd been canceled about 150 times. And yet, he has not stopped. His name is John Guandolo, and just saying that name is going to get me attacked from here to Timbuktu. And I don't care either, because John Guandolo, a former FBI agent, although don't hold that against him, and a former Marine, recon, and also a national security expert, is a man who has never wavered. He is misrepresented online and regularly attacked as being Islamophobic for the crime of investigating, researching, and being an expert in, I guess, what he would describe as the political, cultural, soft, nonviolent invasion of the United States of America by certain factions within Islam. And of course, just saying that word is going to get you branded as Islamophobic. And we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more with a man who does not hold back. So with that, I would like to introduce John Guandolo.
Thanks for having me.
How did I do that? Did I get anything wrong?
That was good, except you said former Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine.
Oh, so I thought that was only about, the CIA. Once a spy, always a spy, That's too funny. Okay, John, there are, this is a, very different landscape today from when you began. And I wonder if you could, one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview with you and not somebody else is that you have both a strategic and a tactical understanding of what you see as the threat in the United States from, I don't know, how would you describe it? Would you describe it as radical Islam?
No. The only thing radical about what the Islamic movement's doing is they're radically correct according to normative and universally taught Islamic doctrine. So what Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State and Hezbollah and Hamas being an inherent part of the Muslim Brotherhood, everything they do is lawful.
Okay, can you explain it for us? Start with who is the Muslim Brotherhood? So
the Muslim Brotherhood is an Islamic movement. It's one of a number of movements that have existed in the last over a century. The Brotherhood was created in 1928 in Egypt. But so you've got movements like Tablighi Jamaat, Jamaat-e-Islami, and others. But the Muslim Brotherhood is a movement, and the reason it's a focus is because in North America and Europe and other places, it's the leading edge of the Islamic movement in those regions.
Well, and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt is part of the inspiration for Al-Qaeda and the modern jihad.
That's right.
That we've been witnessing.
It is the inspiration it's the driving force that underpins the modern, the 20th and 21st century jihad. But everything that they espouse, you can read their bylaws, and that is, they tell you in their bylaws, first line of their bylaws, it's an international organization which seeks to establish Allah's divine law in the land.
Allah's divine law.
Which is Sharia, Islamic law.
And when you say in the land, you mean
on the earth. That's their goal.
So worldwide.
To create a global Islamic state, a caliphate on the earth. What's interesting is that's the purpose of Al-Qaeda, stated purpose. It's the stated purpose of Islamic State. It's the stated purpose of fill in the blank. Pick any other. It's this, if you look at the largest voting bloc in the United Nations is the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The OIC, it's 57 members. That's 56 Islamic nations, every Islamic nation on earth, plus something they call the State of Palestine, which if you know your geography, that's called Israel. But anyway, let's not let facts get in the way of a good story. But the OIC in 1993 served the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, which they approved. Now, this is the key. The head of state level, at the king level of every Islamic nation on earth, under the banner of the OIC, approved the Cairo Declaration in 1990. They served it to the UN in 1993, and the last two articles literally say, we, the entire Muslim world, only understand human rights through the lens of Sharia, and it's our only reference for everything articulated in this declaration, which is called the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam. So the entire Muslim world has put the entire non-Muslim world on notice that their entire understanding of relations between human beings is through the lens of Sharia. And if you read 5, 10, 15 books of Islamic law, they all say the exact thing, and that's this, which, by the way, is the same thing that the most widely used textbooks in the United States and Canada and Europe say is the purpose of Islam. The purpose of Islam is to establish a global Islamic state, a caliphate, and impose Sharia on everybody on earth. That's it. That's the end of the story. There's no other purpose.
Is that something that every Muslim knows and understands or not?
You can't say that. That could be the case. I doubt it. But if you look at Sharia, the reason that we see starting in the 70s, you go back to the 60s, Islamic law, Sharia, states that when the Islamic community, the Ummah, has the ability and the resources to wage jihad, they're mandated to, because again, the purpose of Islam is to wage war against non-Muslims to establish Sharia. That's it. And so when through Saudi Arabian oil money, we see, what do? Well, Saudi Arabia starts building Islamic schools and mosques and things, first in Islamic countries, and educating the Muslim community, right? The Muslim Brotherhood's revolution, which you're very familiar with, in January 2011, was targeted at Muslim countries who were not obeying Sharia and overthrowing those countries first. And when that was done, per their own doctrine, strategic doctrine, then they turned their sights on. Now, they had already been infiltrating Europe in the 50s and the United States in the 60s, 70s, and on. But they amplified their efforts significantly in these last 10 years. We can go back to 1960 in the United States and walk forward the key points. But the point for this beginning of this discussion is everything they do, everything Al-Qaeda does, ISIS, now the Islamic State, the Muslim Brotherhood, Tablighi Jamaat, Jamaat-e-Islami, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Hezbollah, Iran, Jordan,
HTS
Egypt,
in Syria,
Pakistan, all of them. And it's part of the constitution in Egypt. It's part of the constitution in Iran, Sharia. Everything they do, Sharia is not only the blueprint for how they fight the war, it is what they seek to impose on everyone. America, after 9/11, the U.S. government went to war against who knows, because we've never actually declared war and we've never identified the enemy. So America has been at war, I would argue, for longer than 2001 in the modern era, certainly since 1979 when Iran declared a global jihad. again, to impose Allah's divine law in the land. Our warfighting doctrine in the United States says when you assess a threat, you begin with who the enemy says they are and why they say they're fighting. 100% of this enemy, the nation states, I go back to the OIC's Cairo Declaration, the military jihadi organizations like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, et al., and the Islamic movements like the Muslim Brotherhood, all say we're Muslims waging jihad in the cause of Allah to establish an Islamic State under Sharia. Since 9/11, we have never identified the enemy, and we've never identified why they're fighting, which they explicitly state is Sharia.
All George Bush did after 9/11 was to establish the axis of evil, right? That's how he kind of put it out there.
Right.
He never went into, I mean, obviously people put Al-Qaeda's face on that, but he created that sort of narrative of the axis of evil. You're either with us or against us. And people thought they were fighting Al-Qaeda, but that provided an avenue for U.S. leaders afterwards to say, oh, well, here's the Taliban and they're different. They're not like Al-Qaeda. So we can just give them their entire country back and help them kill all the people that helped us.
That's right.
To fight them. And they're not a threat because look what the Taliban they just want the U.S. to get out of their country. They just want the invaders to go home.
That's right.
I would be on the ground in Afghanistan interviewing people within the Taliban commanders, Taliban foot soldiers, and they would tell me the truth. No, we want an Islamic world. Al-Qaeda are our brothers. But of course, in the U.S., you're reading the New York Times, the Taliban just want you to go home.
Right. So you just hit on a couple huge points. We can, and I do when I teach law enforcement, for instance, you pull down FBI affidavits. You listen to the testimony in court. You can go back to the blind sheikh's trial in New York, Al-Qaeda, right? Abdul Rahman.
And that was he was responsible for the very first.
He was the legal jurist overseeing Al-Qaeda operations in the United States, yes.
Yeah.
And he's a global hero to them. He's deceased now. He died in Supermax in Denver, or in Colorado.
And that was before 9/11.
Yeah, that was before 9/11. But in the courtroom, and the prosecutor, the chief prosecutor for New York at the time, who oversaw that case, Andrew McCarthy, said, what did they say in court? Muslims who testified on behalf of the prosecution would be asked questions about what does this mean in Islam, or how does jihad apply here? And they would all point to what Andrew McCarthy called, the homicidal maniac in the courtroom, the blind sheikh. They'd all point to him and said, you'd have to address that question with him because he's the Islamic scholar. He's a jurist. He knows Sharia better than anyone on the planet. And that's what it's all about. It's about Sharia. And here's why this matters. When you don't understand what you just said, is they're all tied together. Now, they disagree on who's going to be in charge.
That's right.
And they'll fight each other about that. They'll kill each other about that.
They're fighting for supremacy within the movement.
That's right.
Who gets to lead?
That's
right.
Who
gets the rewards? Who gets to be in charge of what? That's what they're fighting each other for.
But they all agree that the non-Muslim world is the enemy. 100%.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
You're just reminding me when I was in Afghanistan and went through the war there, when the first time when the Taliban were overthrown by the Afghan soldiers with the help of the U.S. and the skies and covert assistance. Well, there was at one point, I was on an operation where they found a container full of prisoners. And there was a local Afghan commander who ran that operation.
Yeah.
And he was saying to me, oh, thank you, United States. Thank you so much for your help and all the rest of it. And I said, the U.S. is talking about going to war in Iraq. I said, because the U.S. helped you defeat your enemy here, would you help them defeat Saddam Hussein? I wanted to know what he was going to say, right? Well, it was a flat out, what? No, absolutely not. And I was like, I'd spent a couple months talking to this guy, right, during the war with the Taliban. I was there when Al-Qaeda was still on the ground and the Taliban was still running the country. 90% of the territory is what they held. And so I was like, you've been telling me for months that you want the U.S. to help us. They have to help us. They have to help us. They helped you. You won. You just freed, dozens of your own prisoners. Emotional reunifications. You're telling me, thank you to the United States, but you won't go fight for the U.S.? And he said, never. And I said, why not? And he said, because Saddam is Muslim. Iraq is Muslim. Is it an Islamic country? I said, yes. And he said, well, as a Muslim, I can't fight against...
Exactly.
I can't fight for the infidels against a Muslim.
That's right.
He said, no true Muslim will ever do that.
And let me just say something. This is I'm so glad you shared that. When I was still in the FBI, but then I got recruited at the end of 2008 out of the FBI, as you know, by Rich Higgins, and went and worked in the DOD. Rich
Higgins, who was a very... a wonderful man and a very well-respected intelligence.
Brilliant strategic mind.
Brilliant,
on this whole war. They had me start briefing senior government officials, like the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the Homeland Security, the Judiciary, a former FBI, CIA, DIA directors, 3- and 4-star generals and admirals. And what was shocking for me, because at the time, you can call it idealistic or naivete, but I still believed our system was functional. And
join the club.
Yeah. And what I learned was none of these people knew what I was talking about when we were briefing about why they're fighting us, about Sharia, about the global movement, about how they did what they did, their modus operandi. It was shocking.
Which all began long before 9/11.
Long before 9/11. What's interesting with regards to what you just said, when I briefed military guys, especially guys that were like colonels and lieutenant colonels, especially when they would sit in for day-long briefings and actually get it at a deep level. There were usually two reactions, sadness and anger. I mean, I've had lieutenant colonels literally walk out of a brief and kick tables over and cursed walking around. And the reason they were angry is because they said, if I had known Sharia, I could have brought more people back alive. Because once you understand Sharia, because it's the blueprint for how they fight, you not only know the defeat mechanism,
I see,
and you know that when it looks like there's an opportunity for you to go easy on them, you should smash the enemy. That's exactly the time to smash them. You understand when they ask for a truce, that's the time to obliterate them.
Yeah.
But we have had so many attorneys on the ground in the middle of combat, worried, and we're prosecuting our own guys while letting Al-Qaeda guys walk. Just like many other instances, the enemy views that as total weakness, and when they see that weakness, Sharia requires them to fight harder.
They exploit
and be more ruthless.
Well, and of course, you'll have all these people screaming and shouting that, but because we hold ourselves to a higher standard and we're better than that, and we have laws and rules that we're supposed to follow, and they use that to tie your hands. I mean, I saw things on the battlefield that I knew should never, ever, ever have happened. Like when I was in Ramadi, where I watched so many U.S. soldiers get hit, where I said in the speech when I got my Emmy for a series of reports that I did there for CBS News, I said I went to Ramadi because if you looked at a map of Iraq, the earth around Ramadi was soaked with American blood, drenched in it. And that's what drew me there, because that seemed important enough not to ignore. Yeah. And we would be attacked day after day after day. And where would they go? Into the hospital. And then the U.S. would stop. And I would say, well, what are you going to do? And they would be like, well, we can't do anything. They're in the hospital. I'm like, but they're in the hospital. Yes. Our rules of engagement don't allow us to go into hospitals. That's what's so interesting about the Palestinian or the Gaza conflict right now, is that Israel has taken off those gloves, and they have said, you want to hide in schools and hospitals and so on, we're coming for you. You're not going to use that against us anymore.
Right.
And of course, that allows in the media and in the political world, that allows people, gives them all the room they need to say, look at Israel targeting,
right.
Civilian targets and,
right.
Brutally, going after civilians and all the accusations of genocide, which is so ironic to me because one party in that conflict has as its stated goal the genocide of all Jews.
That's right.
That is literally what they're fighting for.
That's Islamic doctrine. That's normative Islamic doctrine. That's not...
And not just in Israel, by the way.
Correct.
They will hunt every last Jew down all across the world.
Yep.
And somehow people just leave that out of the conversation. And no one cares.
It's convenient.
By the way, not even the Jewish community really does a good job on that, I have to say.
They don't. As a matter of fact, I work with a number of conservative Jewish organizations as well as leaders in the United States. And they're frustrated by their own, fellow Jews who work with easily identifiable Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas leaders in the United States under the guise of interfaith outreach or cooperating because, the Muslims will say, you don't want us to be targeted like you were under Hitler, so, help us. And they do. I mean, these are soft-hearted and soft-minded people who have clearly lost the ability to think and reason. But that this is, again, it goes back to, you've got to have the capability to, and the determination to proactively understand the enemy, how they're doing what they're doing, and why they're being so successful. And the last thing I'll say about what you just mentioned is, who were our advisors to President Bush and his cabinet after 9/11? Well, who was working with him? On 9/11, working in the White House was Suhail Khan, the son of Mahbub Khan, who's one of the most prolific Muslim Brotherhood leaders in North America. Matter of fact, at the time, the largest Muslim Brotherhood organization in North America, still one of the largest, but at the time it was the leading Muslim Brotherhood organization in the United States and North America, Islamic Society in North America. They give out an annual award called the Mahbub Khan Award. And it's a matter of fact, in the largest terrorism financing trial in American history, the U.S. versus Holy Land Foundation trial, adjudicated in my hometown of Dallas in 2008, that ISNA is not only a Muslim Brotherhood organization, it directly funds the terrorist group Hamas. They're still in existence. And the guy they hand out an annual award called the Mahbub Khan Award, and his son was in the White House on 9/11 in the Bush administration. Who did the Bush administration turn to? Guys like Muzammil Siddiqui, one of the leading, I would argue, in North America, #1 Muslim Brotherhood leader. And other people like that in that administration advising them. And the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, and others work directly with ISNA, which is based in Indiana, and other known Muslim Brotherhood groups. So when you have people, I mean, look, under Clinton, his Islamic advisor, now why a U.S. president needs an Islamic advisor, I have no idea, but his Islamic advisor was Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, who's the single largest fundraiser for al-Qaeda in the United States. That was his Islamic advisor for 2 terms. Now, al-Amoudi was arrested at Heathrow Airport with, $340,000 cash in a suitcase that he was taking to Libya from Damascus, Syria. But anyway,
when was that?
What's that? When was that?
When was that?
2000. He was arrested in 2004.
Yeah.
And here's the point. So how is the FBI and Secret Service vetting doing? Now that's back, that was during Clinton, and he wasn't arrested until the Bush administration.
Right. So through Clinton, Bush, I know through Obama, we're going to talk about that, and I mean
through today,
through Biden, and even to today. Okay, John. Before we go to what is really the counterintelligence part of this conversation, can you describe for me, because, after 9/11, it was all about Al-Qaeda and the wars in, Afghanistan and then Iraq. And then it was then Obama led the charge in saying Al-Qaeda is decimated and, there's no Islamic threat. And it dropped off the radar completely, right? Nobody wanted to talk about it. It doesn't exist. It was fake to begin with, and it doesn't exist. And now, so can you explain to people how you see the nature of that threat? And when you say, understand the threat, understand what they're doing, and understand the enemy. So help us understand those three.
Yes. So first, in the broader sense, America's at war because people have declared war against us. Nation states and entities have declared war against us. The way in the United States, I'll just focus on the U.S. and we can go more broadly as you want to go. There exists an Islamic movement, capital M. That movement exists with doctrine, published strategy, hundreds of lines of operation, and a massive network of thousands of organizations. There is a communist movement, the Islamic movement, which was introduced into the United States by the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1960s. There is a communist movement that's been here for over 100 years that has published doctrine, strategy, hundreds of lines of operation. And most people now know it, even if they don't identify it as these things. But what's going on in elementary, junior high, high schools, college and university campuses, what's going on through local and state level chambers of commerce, the propaganda, information, the economic warfare, all that. Again, this movement has all of those things, and they have thousands of organizations. At the local level, across the United States, those two movements, along with entities and individuals that have significant resources, collaborators, that are not necessarily ideologically aligned with either movement, support them, and people financing them, and those are some of the same. That's the enemy. Now,
Can I ask you one thing? Why would they support them if they don't believe in them?
Because it has to do with their goal, which is to undermine the United States.
So they all share the same goal.
Yes.
The Marxist movement and the Islamic movement, and then basically other domestic enemies who seek the destruction of this country.
Correct.
And the three of them work together.
Yeah, it's all about... So you've got the communist movement, a totalitarian movement, governed by doctrine, strategies, and these networks, so they're implementing their plan. The Islamic movement, which has published doctrine, strategies, lines of operation, and these networks, which is a totalitarian ideology, right?
Both of them are, yes. I mean, you just look at them. Do they believe in freedom of speech? No. Do they believe in freedom of religion? No. In fact, Marxism doesn't believe in any religion. And no freedom.
Right, no freedom.
No freedom at all.
It's a totalitarian ideology, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's insanity, especially because they get cast as being, opposite each other, but they're really not.
No, and so I want to preempt some questions that will probably be in the minds of your viewers as they're listening to this. Is number one, I'm well aware of other global movements and major hostile entities like, the secular humanist movement or the World Economic Forum or the United Nations as a whole, or hostile nation states. But the key is those hostile nation states, be it China, be it Pakistan, be it Saudi Arabia, be it Qatar, be it UAE, Turkey, and the list goes on. These efforts, including the International Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic movements, are coordinating these efforts in the United States. And I'll just give a few examples so your audience understands there's meat here. Excuse me. The communist movement. So you have Black Lives Matter as an example, which is not, it was never a civil rights organization.
It's a Marxist organization.
It was created by the largest Chinese communist organizations in America, Freedom Road, Socialist Organization, which is not socialist, communist, and Liberation Road. working in tandem with Chinese Progressive Association, Asians for Black Lives, many others that are known communist organizations. The CPA, Chinese Progressive Association, works directly with the Chinese consulates here in the United States with Chinese Communist Party officials. By their own mouth, they admit that. So they're taking direction. Now, that's not the only information we have about what they're doing, but it's so easy to put your finger on. By their own admission, they're being directed by the Chinese Communist Party officials here. Besides being against the law, it's evidence of a foreign hostile power violently operating in the United States, right? Now, their leadership says they're waging war against the United States and intend to bring down the United States. I always believe when an enemy says that, you should believe it.
Yeah.
In the Islamic movement, so you have, at the international level, you can go back to 79 if we want to just stick to the modern movement, but go back to 1928 when the Muslim Brotherhood was established. Why were they established? Because the Ottoman Empire was dissolved, and that didn't sit well because Kemal Ataturk, Kemal Ataturk said, we're dissolving the Islamic State, the Ottoman Empire, which was the Caliphate. We're abolishing Sharia, so no more wearing of the Sunnah beard. No longer will there be the call of prayer. And we're creating secular Turkey and building a secular army to defend secular Turkey. Well, that went over like a lead duck in the Muslim world. And so the Muslim Brotherhood created, the Muslim Brotherhood was created by
as
Hassan
a counter to that.
Right, to basically say, to reestablish the caliphate under Sharia. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Because that is the requirement under Islam. And so that's what they do. We see in 79, Iran declares the global jihad and makes it very public. There are a lot of markers we could go through historically. I won't kind of spend the time doing that, but if we just look at the modern jihad from that time forward, at the international level, you have the OIC working in conjunction with the International Muslim Brotherhood, working with the legal entities, because this is a totalitarian system, the Islamic movement guided by a law, doctrine, Sharia, and that's exactly what they're doing. They push strategic messaging through, like again, in the United States, through their major legal organizations in North America, Fiqh Council of North America, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists in America, which then push them down to the mosques. I will tell you the command and control they have from the international level down to the local level in the United States is something I've never read about, I've never seen. It is so well coordinated. And when I brief state, local, and federal officials and demonstrate that, that is one of the things that blows their mind, that at the leadership level internationally, the Islamic movement can say, okay, we're taking a turn. We're advancing. So we're moving the message here. Boom, put it out. And within a week or two, that's what's going out in many mosques across the United States. It's incredible. And I'll be delicate about this, but so
that's unusual for you, John.
It is, but my team and our team, we have a pretty good intelligence network within this community. And I can tell you that it's impressive. I once got accused by an Army colonel. It's like, sounds like you are fawning over the enemy. I'm not like, I said they need to be crushed like cockroaches, but they are running circles around us and have been long before 9/11. And the fact that they got an Al-Qaeda guy advising the President of the United States should at least be some evidence of that. And that continues today because of what you just said. This is much more a counterintelligence war than it is violent. So that, you asked me to lay it out, that is our enemy. The Islamic movement, the communist movement, and those collaborating and financing them because where the rubber meets the road in Anywhere USA, that's who's getting it done. So when people raise their hands and they're like, well, what about the UN? I'm like, okay, what can you do about the UN? And the answer is always the same, nothing. What can you do about the World Economic Forum? Nothing. What we train communities to do is where the World Economic Forum's policies or lines of operation touch your county, well, now we can do something. Now we can grab it, we can burn it, we can break it, we can do it. Lawfully, you can rip these things out of your community. But it requires your citizens to understand it, to then put pressure on local and sometimes state officials to actually do anything. And when they don't, the citizens, there's a lot of things citizens can do to lawfully make these organizations and leaders feel very uncomfortable in their communities and kick them out. Now, it helps when local prosecutors and law enforcement get on board, but citizens can do it. And we're going to win or lose the war at the local level.
Okay, so what's happening at the local level? What do you see? How do you see this movement and this threat? I mean, I know you think they're winning.
Oh, they're crushing us right now.
So why do you say that?
But I would say, because the evidence is there, the fact that, so when you understand Sharia.
Right. And define Sharia, please.
So Islamic law, Sharia, that comes from the Quran and the Sunnah. So the Sunnah being the example of the Prophet Muhammad. So there are a couple basic things without going into a lengthy class. I like to say it's actually not complicated. When it comes to how the Islamic world and how Sharia relates to the non-Muslim world, there's complete agreement on the big pieces of Sharia. There's no disagreement. So, and where there is disagreement, it's, when you crucify someone, do you kill them first, then crucify them, or do you crucify them and let them die? Like different schools of Islamic jurisprudence will disagree on that.
Yeah.
But at the end, you're dead, right? Yeah. So that's the point. So here's the point. It comes from the Quran and the example of Muhammad. So I'll only say a few things about the Quran. The Quran is not, from chapter 1 to chapter 114, is not set up chronologically. Islam, because it's in the Quran, says that what comes chronologically last overrules everything that comes before it. The scholars have laid out what that chronological list looks like, and the last chapter to talk about jihad, chapter 9, the last chapter to talk about relations with non-Muslims, chapter 5. Chapter 9, fight and slay the unbeliever wherever you find them and lie in wait for them in every stratagem of war. Chapter 5, take not Jews and Christians as your friends, they are but friends of each other, and any Muslim that takes them as a friend is of them, which means you're an apostate and you should be killed, right? So that's it. So you need to know that, and then you need to know the tafsir. The tafsir is an authoritative part of Islamic law which legally defines every verse in the Quran. So there is no such thing in Islam as a Muslim that says, oh, I was reading this verse in the Quran and this is what it means to me. That's a capital crime in Islam to say that. Because
it's unlike the Bible in that sense.
It's unlike anything. And I don't like doing comparisons because Islam, well, I'll just go to the most widely used textbook for 7th graders in U.S. Islamic schools. It's a book called What Islam is All About by Yahya Emmerich, happens to be a Muslim brother, go figure. And the very first page, this is for 12-year-olds now in U.S. Islamic schools, teaching Muslim children about Islam. It says, Islam, this is a quote, Islam is not a religion, however, but a complete way of life. And it goes on to explain that complete way of life is governed by Sharia, which comes from the Quran and the Sunnah. It explains Islamic law to the 12-year-olds. It has quotes in there that explains that jihad is one of the 3 duties of every Muslim, that if you die in jihad, you go to paradise, and the duty of every Muslim citizen is to be loyal to the Islamic State, and it's the duty of Muslims to establish an Islamic State under Sharia. That's pretty simple. So what Muslim children are taught in U.S. Islamic schools is exactly what Al-Qaeda teaches its soldiers when it's doing classes on the battlefield. Just so we're clear.
That's the black flag of Al-Qaeda. That's the ideology.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And the basis of all jihad, because Al-Qaeda is the Arabic word for base.
Right.
Foundation. So that's meant to be the foundation of all these other jihads.
So if we look at the example of the Prophet Muhammad, I'm not going to go into the history of it and the hadith and all of that, but here's what I would say. In the most authoritative reports about what Muhammad did and said, he married a 6-year-old and consummated the relationship when she was 9. He condoned torture and was ordered torture. He personally participated in beheading up to 900 Jews after the Battle of the Trench. He said, I have been commanded to wage war against those who do not accept Islam. And the list goes on. So when you see Muslims doing these things, and you see people like Bill Clinton, George Bush, Obama, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, mayors, police chiefs, congressmen, senators, national security advisors saying that that's radical, that's extremist, that they don't represent true Islam, those people are lying. Now, they may just be stupid, ignorant, but I feel like it's a good place to input this. If you're the president or a police chief or anybody in between, a general officer, and you don't know what we're talking about right now is the facts. These are the facts. This is the basis for why our enemy is fighting us, and that it's real because it's published. I mean, the most widely used book of Islamic law, the Umdat al-Salik, Reliance of the Traveler, it's published. It's the most widely used in North America. It's published in English in Beltsville, Maryland. And you say you don't know it? You're unprofessional. And because Americans are dead because of your unprofessionalism, on the law books, that's called criminal negligence. And we put doctors and lawyers in jail for that. So that's the basis for why they're fighting. That's a picture for everyone. And the last thing I'll say regarding your question about, help frame this is our leaders at every level have told us since 9/11 that it's us against violent extremists. Now, here's a really important point. There's no legal basis for that term, violent extremists. There's nowhere in federal code that phrase is defined. The Constitution requires people who take an oath to protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the term enemies is legally defined. And the professional canons defined our professional duty for anyone that's taken the oath and for those in positions that are required to obey and show fidelity to that oath. Here's why it matters. DHS has created policy how to pursue violent extremists that has no basis in the law. So if you wonder, why are we arresting patriots and promoting jihadis? For instance, we can go back to being the advisor to the president or to be fill in the blank, whatever these positions are that they've been in inside the government in the last 30 years. It's because there's official DHS policy that orients U.S. government efforts towards that, to literally intentionally focusing not on the enemy, because that's not part of U.S. government policy, but it is a part of the oath of office. And the term enemy is legally defined in federal code. So do you understand, like at a foundational level, the enemy, the Islamic advisors, have literally the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe created the CVE program, Countering Violent Extremism, the Muslim Association of Britain, Muslim Council of Britain, and the guys that run the mosque that you've been to over there are affiliated with those organizations. Those are the biggest Muslim Brotherhood organizations in England. They're the ones who helped create that CVE, which the British government gobbled up. And then our DHS and FBI went over there in the 2006-2007 timeframe, and we gobbled it up and brought it back here. And that is an information operation that literally orients foreign policy and counterterrorism strategy away from the enemy and towards violent extremism, which has no actual legal definition.
It's how they control the narrative.
That's exactly right.
And
it's one of the many ways.
One of the many ways they fund it and they take control over it. So this is why you'll find that even in, say, counter-trafficking, half the organizations roughly in counter-trafficking are trafficking people.
That's right.
You know, is what people don't understand. It's that if you dig deep into the finances of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, you'll find Soros money or Soros affiliated money.
That's right.
Because they need that threat to exist so that they can focus everyone's attention on the white male patriot and focus it away from where they want it to be. And then at the same time, they rebrand it as extremist and to marginalize it. Right. And take it out of the mainstream. All these are systems of control, and it's hard for people to get their head around that. I want to come back to one thing that you said, though, because you and I both know we'll be significantly attacked for speaking about this. It's not new for either of us.
20 years in the
and you definitely have been in the trenches of long before most people even knew what cancel culture really was. You were being savaged on a daily basis. I remember looking it up, at least 10 years ago and being like, wow, they hate me, but they really hate this guy. And,
remember, the truth always offends those who don't have it.
Well, yeah, as a really great journalist once said, Gary Webb, when he said, that all the awards and everything, this great career he had, wasn't because he was such a great journalist. It was just because he'd never written anything important enough to suppress. You know what I mean? He found out when he wrote about the CIA introducing crack cocaine into the streets of America. First they applauded him and then they stripped him of everything, and he ended up killing himself with 2 bullets to the head. But before he died, he said, I realized it wasn't, because I was so great. It was just because I hadn't ever done anything before this. I hadn't done anything important enough to suppress. So that's kind of how you're, as they say, you're over the target, right, when they come for you.
That's right. My friend Bill Warner says that. If you're taking flack, you're over the target, so keep at it.
Right. They don't waste their bullets on people who are, shooting off into the abyss and aren't important. Yeah, don't matter. So to that end, I just wanted to pick up when you talked about that book, for 12-year-olds, where it says Islam is not a religion. That really resonates with me because when I was based in London, living there, and I went one night to do a story at the Finsbury Park Mosque, very significant mosque in the global jihad, where the one-eyed sheikh was based, right? Abu Hamza al-Masri.
Al-Masri,
yeah. And a lot of Algerians, they're some pretty scary people, I must say, I can usually get a smile out of just about anybody on earth, even Taliban and Al-Qaeda guys who didn't want to smile, who I encountered on the battlefield and interviewed and all that over the years. I can break just about anybody with grace. And those guys, man, they were a wall. But I got after the interview was over, interview, by the way, with a guy, the imam said to me that they were going to replace the UK government and that there would be Sharia law in Britain. I mean, he told me that was their stated goal. Of course. And I said, but, the laws that give you the freedom to fight for this in this country, that's what enables you to exist. And you're going to get rid of all of it. And he said, yeah. And I was like, he's like, well, why are you looking at me? He's like, you guys are the idiots. You let this happen. Even they recognized.
Oh, sure.
They know that they're exploiting your laws, your freedoms. They know they're exploiting it in order to obliterate it. And they fully recognize that we're slitting our own throats and they're laughing at us. Yes. Basically what he said. Yeah. But I got involved in a long conversation with a big group of guys, which easily got heated, and they were all screaming and shouting at me at the same time. My camera crew was annoyed, but they
have that effect on people, on Muslims. Sometimes
I have, I have countless great stories and experiences and friends and, and people I know lived many years in the Islamic world. So it actually dwarfs that. But these guys challenged me to say, you don't know anything about Islam. And of course I had to acknowledge that, well, compared to you guys, I know nothing. But I mean, I've been around it a bit. There are a few things I know. So they're like, okay, so what do you know? What do you know? And I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump in there. And I didn't get more than 3 words in because I made the fatal mistake of saying something that is profoundly untrue, which was Islam is a religion. I said, well, Islam is a religion. No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm like, what do you mean? And they said, it's not a religion. That's your first mistake. It's a civilization.
That's right.
And every single part of your life within that civilization is prescribed in the Quran and under Sharia law.
That's right.
And
see, it's very simple, but
that
in the West, it's so hard to grasp.
So when you say that about this book teaching that, I know that's true. I don't need to go to the internet and consult Wikipedia. I know it's true because I was told that. And after that, of course, I used to raise it often with Islamic people that I knew or met along the way or interviewed or whatever. And they always affirmed that. So that's a key point here because obviously in the US with the Constitution and the First Amendment, freedom of religion and so on, the first argument against any kind of action against what is, by their own words, a political and cultural revolution,
right,
which is the overthrow of your government.
That's right.
Right? But they sort of soften it by saying it's a cultural, political. I don't really want my culture overthrown, quite frankly. I don't want to wear a hijab. I don't want to have to, I don't want to live under Islamic law. I don't. I want to live under the Declaration of Independence and Judeo-Christian principles and the freedoms, and rights that I have now.
Yeah, they come with that.
And somehow that's a crime to say that. And it's not a slant on Islam or any other culture. But I live here because this is the culture that I want my children to grow up in. Right. This is what I believe in. These are the values, consistent with the God I know, right? And I think we have a right to that.
Yes.
Just like they do. If you want to live under Islam in Saudi Arabia or Iran or wherever else, that's your business. But so what my point here is that this idea that our laws guarantee you the right to work consistently for the replacement and of your own culture and belief systems is what makes it very hard to identify this threat, because these the people leading this challenge or this fight, this war, they understand very well how to exploit that in the law.
Yes, they do.
And so they will never tell you, we want to replace U.S. law with Sharia law. They'll never say that openly because they know that's a crime under U.S. law, right?
It is, but a lot more. So this goes to an interesting point. In Islamic law, the closer they get to victory, the more honest you're going to see them be.
Same with the Marxists and the globalists.
That's right. If you see, like right after 9/11, their mouthpieces in the United States, which would include guys like John Brennan, were saying things like jihad is this, internal struggle to better themselves. They had these billboard campaigns and campaigns on buses. My jihad is to do my homework. My jihad is to be a better person, to do better at athletics, all this. That's all garbage. But that's a propaganda campaign. And they would publicly deny that jihad had anything to do with war and that. Nothing. It was spiritual struggle. Now, they kept that going, but around the 2012, 2013 timeframe, then they started to be a little more honest about it. And it was the reason they get more honest is because the closer they think they are to victory, the more honest they were going to be, because when you're living under Sharia, you'll know all about Sharia. And then it's too late, and that's the point. So now they are, quite a few of them are making, in Europe, they're like, yeah, we're here to, you're going down. And I would agree, since the king is complicit. King Charles is complicit, completely surrendering. Prime Minister is complicit, completely surrendering.
Keith Starmer.
Yeah, I don't see...
In the UK.
Yeah, I don't see any leaders in the UK that are doing anything of value to stem the tide. And the citizens are unarmed, so good luck with that.
So when you make a statement like, King Charles is complicit, what do you base that on?
His behavior in the last 20 years. I mean, he's, he has kowtowed to the Islamic movement leadership for Islam. I mean, when he was a prince, he did it all the time. He'd go to their events and he'd lift them up and tell people they're great people and thank you so much. He just was, they're packing up meals for Ramadan. He and his wife packing up meals for Ramadan, saying, "Oh, we love." And of course, the organizations he's working with are Muslim Brotherhood organizations. This is just, there was a time when the leadership in the West was Great Britain, and they waged war against these people and destroyed them for good reason, because they were trying to kill and destroy the Western world. But now it's they just surrender. They just lay on their backs and invite them to walk all over them. I mean, it's disgusting. The cowardice is staggering.
Why?
One, because I don't think Prince Charles has any anchor in his life, that he just wants to be liked. And they provide him a platform for that. And they feed his ego. That's my assessment of the king, of Charles. But for different people, it's different things. Some people are afraid. They're afraid of getting killed. They're afraid of losing their job. So they'll risk the future of their children and grandchildren. And those people, I think, are self-centered cowards. Maybe that's one and the same. You say coward, it's the same thing. Others are some of these four-star generals and some of these senior CIA and State Department executives keep their mouths shut because they know when they retire, they're going to get a 7 or 8 figure salary from Qatar or Saudi Arabia, from China. I mean, some of the things that we now know just in the last couple of years, you've got dozens of former members of Congress, Senate, and the House, Republicans and Democrats, that are on the payroll of organizations that directly report to, CCP, the Chinese Communist government.
And I would challenge that to say they're not all former. The current.
True.
Right?
Taking money. So a lot of it is,
sitting members
again,
of the House and Senate are on the payroll of the CCP.
Correct. And some of it comes back to, I guess it's all, you could call it self-interest, but it's not just that. When you swear an oath and you're taking money on behalf of an adversary of the United States, well.
Isn't that treason?
I would argue legally it is treason.
18 U.S.
Sedition,
treason
aiding and
sedition.
abetting.
Chapter
There's all
115.
kinds of federal charges.
John, I would also maybe challenge you on that very gentle assessment of the king. And I tell you why. Because I have known for many years a man formerly in U.S. intelligence who spent several years underground training to infiltrate what he calls the global cult at the UN level. And his faction was the Islamic faction of the globalists. So, I mean, it makes total sense. If you're globalist, you're going to have factions on every part of the globe, right? And I would say it's maybe less about flattery and ego for Prince Charles as the fact that he's a globalist.
I don't disagree with that. I've heard people make the argument. They think he's converted. I wouldn't even...
That's unknowable for us.
It's unknowable. He certainly has all the way he supports the Islamic movement. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think it's not worth.
It's not worth debating because
because
it doesn't
everything
really
he's
matter.
doing advances their cause.
Well, here's to me the clearest example, and maybe I take this one a little bit personally because I was gang raped, not because I was gang raped in Egypt. It wouldn't matter. I could have been gang raped in Timbuktu. The fact that you have these rape gangs in the Islamic rape gangs in the United Kingdom for not 1 decade, not 2 decades, but around 3 decades, for 30 years, you have allowed Islamic gangs to rape and persecute young girls in your country, and you have lied about it and covered it up, and you still call them grooming gangs?
Right.
are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind? And I even spoke to someone from the UK the other day who said, well, it's partly because these were poorer families. And they didn't, they were a little bit intimidated because of the mass Islamic populations that moved into these areas in the north of England, Birmingham and these places. And they didn't have the confidence to challenge it. And I was like, isn't it more because your leaders and your law enforcement didn't want to hear about it?
The police leadership and the local leadership and the national leadership.
They didn't want to hear about it.
Nope.
Because, you'll be Islamophobic, right?
Yep.
You're anti-Islam, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're full of hate.
Right.
And that's something, let's just dispense with that, because having lived in the Islamic world, having spent many years in Islamic countries, and having, a plethora of very important people in my life who are Muslim to this day, I bear absolutely no ill will to Muslim people. I have nothing but love in my heart for many of the people that I know. And I have had many years, and I've learned and found things in those societies that I love and respect. But I'm not going to take a knee. I'm not going to bend over. You know what I mean? It's like I found things in those places that I didn't agree with at all. In fact, you know what? This is a good moment to take a look at a video that's kind of hard to watch.
Okay.
That was on X, that addresses one aspect, claims to address an aspect of Sharia law called halala, which is where, under Sharia, as you know, a man can divorce his wife by saying 3 times, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. I think it actually applies both ways. Is that right?
Yeah.
But then if he wants to remarry his wife, so it sounds like they had a fight, now he wants her back. There's this weird thing where the woman has to have sex with another man.
She has to remarry another man, have sex with him, and then they need to divorce for her to remarry her original husband. Which
is one of these archaic...
Well, Sharia's barbaric, has no place in civilized world. So that's this normative Sharia. I mean, someone leaves Islam, you kill him. Someone commits adultery, you kill him. Someone's a homosexual, you kill him. Somebody who doesn't convert to Islam, submit to Islamic law and pay the non-Muslim poll tax, you kill him.
And not just kill him, for women, countless women stoned to death in Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, other places, for these kind of crimes. And then, of course, the acid attacks that take place all across the Western world, right, where young girls have...
Many people have never even heard of that.
Which is where if you're considered to have dishonored the family, like you don't want to be forced into marrying someone, very often someone much older than you.
Right.
Right. You've dishonored the family. So your own family, your own brothers and father have a
duty,
an Islamic duty to sometimes kill you and otherwise deface you, which is to melt your face off with acid.
As a matter of fact, Islamic law specifically prescribes that mothers and fathers can kill their children or grandchildren for any reason they deem fit. It's how the law reads. It's very wide open. So the liars, who are the mouthpieces for the Islamic movement, will say things like, oh, the phrase honor killing doesn't even exist in Islamic doctrine or Islamic, culture. I'm like, okay, that's true. It doesn't exist in the Quran or Islamic law. But parents are flat out allowed to kill their children or grandchildren for any reason they see.
And that fit. Is in the law.
That's verbatim in the law. I could pull it out and read it to you. Yeah, it's...
I asked a Muslim colleague of mine once in Afghanistan, I asked him about that. I said, if your daughter got pregnant with someone, with a man's child without your, permission, without being married, what would you do? And he said, under Islam, I would have to kill her.
Yep.
And I said, would you be able to do that? I said, I know you. You're a loving father. You adore your girls. I mean, I knew his family. I said, would you really do that? And he thought about it. He took the time and he thought about it. And he said, well, I would have to under Islamic law, but I don't think I could do it. I said, would you have someone else do it? And he thought about that and he said, I'm not sure that I could, but I would definitely banish her and she would never be seen again. And that was quite something for me. You know, this is a man that I knew for years and worked alongside, and he really wrestled with that. Like it was a real option. Like the killing your own child was a real option.
Right.
You know, and another colleague of mine, he went to pick up actually a Taliban commander that we were interviewing. He picked him up on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and they were very, very late. You know, and he was so angry when he got there. And I said to him, what's wrong? And he said, come and talk to me. And he was furious because the guy was late. When he got in the car, he said, I'm sorry I'm late, but my wife was talking back to me and I had to break her arm. And the whole drive, now there's one Muslim man very upset with another Muslim man for breaking his wife's arm, you know, who didn't believe or support that at all. In fact, someone, I really love him. He's a great friend of mine. But, and he was just so offended and angry, you know, about it. So there is that conflict, right?
Yes. So first, let me read this. So this comes out of the Umdat al-Salik. This is section 01.0. The section is entitled, Who is Subject to Retaliation? Section 1.2 states, the following are not subject to retaliation: a father or mother or their fathers or mothers for killing their offspring or their offspring's offspring, period. No qualifiers. So number one, and I'm just quoting Islamic law, that's why I wrote this book, Islam's Deception, The Truth About Sharia, because when you read it, you understand what Sharia actually is and what it says. It's very clear. What you're talking about is something I think your audience needs to understand. This is our human nature wrestling with the reality of Sharia. You see, because Sharia is barbaric and counter to natural law and our human nature. And so when you look historically across the last 1,400 years that Islam's been around, and people will say those times where there was like less jihad or less, they would say these are periods where the Muslims were doing, and I'm like, no. These are times when the Western world put the heel of their boot on the Muslim world and kept them down, and without organized efforts, movements, without Al-Qaeda, without ISIS, without Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey, informing the current global Muslim population about their duties under Sharia, people drift back to normal human nature, which is not inclined to kill their children.
Yeah.
Not inclined to kill your wife, not inclined to kill non-Muslims. That's the not. Now, you've always had those pockets of people who continue to adhere to Sharia, that continue to do these things consistently throughout history. The entire, I did a video, like a 30-minute video on YouTube called The Continuum of Jihad, where I just take you from Muhammad to today.
Yeah.
And when you look historically, there's a continuum of jihad throughout history. So the reason is when Sharia does not have organized efforts over a period of a century, like we've had now, a century of the Muslim Brotherhood, and then what grows out of that, right? Because you can track it. The Muslim Brotherhood gets started. They're literally changing things in Egypt in the 30s and the 40s. They're killing British soldiers that are in Egypt at the time. They're killing judges that are not adjudicating Sharia. That's what's going on. And then they start spreading into, Europe in the 50s. Why? Because they get this leader, they get leaders in Egypt that are like, hey, we need to put our foot on the Muslim Brotherhood because they're ruining our ability to actually, like some of these countries, Egypt is a great example, that always naturally tends towards trying to deal with the Western world. Countries like Jordan and Egypt have historically battled this. Turkey did, but now Turkey is jihadi controlled. I mean, Erdogan will likely be the caliph.
But even Afghanistan,
True.
when you look back,
True.
you know, when you see, I mean, I knew a family who had a history of working in the Afghan airlines, and I saw the photographs of the air stewardesses, you know, in their cute little mini skirts. And there's lots of photographs you can find of Kabul and these other places that were, you know, completely and utterly different to the way they are today. They've gone back in time.
Right.
Even by their own standards, they've gone back in time.
Right.
And of course, you know, I know just a plethora of Muslim people close to me who are wonderful family fathers who would never in a million years harm their children.
That's right.
But they create this conflict for them that you have to choose
Absolutely.
between
That's
your
right.
human decency and your, you know, how the faith is prescribed. Because their faith,
How the system enforces.
how the civilization enforces the faith,
That's
right?
right.
Because their faith is strong. In fact, I think in some ways that it even strengthened my own faith I'm a Christian, but it strengthened my own faith. A lot of the Muslims I worked with over the years, when we would have philosophical conversations about God. So when you just talk about God and about those sort of godly principles, there's a universality to them. I'm not one of those people that says everyone in the world is the same, because I have sat with, for example, you know, in Gaza and in the West Bank, I've sat with mothers who are celebrating the death of their child
Right.
as a martyr and are offering up others. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like, no. No.
Unrelatable
We're not the
to
same.
most decent human beings.
No, we're not
right?
the same. We're not the same. And I understand how you got there. I understand that. I'm not judging you for that. I'm just saying we're not the same, because there's nothing on earth that's going to get me to that. I'm not giving you my child to blow themselves to pieces for anything. I'm not doing it. I'll fight, but give me
Right.
another way, right?
That's right.
But that's never happening. I don't know a mother in America who's going to do that. Do
Right.
you?
No.
So this idea that we're all the same is not true. But of course, there's universal principles that live and breathe in all of us that unite
right.
us all as human beings.
That's right. And that right there is really key, I think, for your listeners and viewers to understand, is that, I also worked with U.S.-based Afghanis who then, at the behest of me when I was an FBI agent, because of their access, could literally go overseas and go into, give us information on weapons and money caches for Al-Qaeda and safe houses, because they were known in the community. And, as much as I understand how Sharia is applied and what it is, it is very, very difficult because of the level of deception to really discern someone's true nature who's a Muslim. And this is what makes it very difficult. But it's important for people to hear what you just said, that everyone who self-identifies as a Muslim is not a threat. But normative and universal teachings of Islam are naturally barbaric and revolutionary against liberty. So once you understand that, those people advocating Sharia and adhering to Sharia, that puts them on the line and over the line for being the threat.
Over the line, for sure.
What I share with people is, especially with Christians, so I'm not even loving your enemy, just loving your fellow man. If you understand Sharia and you're out there saying, no, real Islam is good, you're part of the problem, because then the children and the men and women trapped in Islam, because Islam requires those who leave Islam to be killed, you're actually piling on. You're one of those nitwits like the people who told Ronald Reagan, oh, don't call the Soviet Union evil. That's just going to create tension. He's like, they're evil. And when he said that, it rattled the cages of the prisons in the Soviet Union with the dissidents. When we speak truth about how barbaric and evil Sharia is, those men and women and those children who want to get out but are scared, you're rattling the cages that they're trapped in. And if you actually love people, then you can't support that system that naturally kills, destroys, enslaves. You can't.
No, it's funny because, I've had many conversations with Muslim friends of mine. I spent 5 years living in Baghdad. I spent years living in Afghanistan. I spent a lot of time in the Palestinian territory. So there's no shortage of, I have a lot of friends.
And a lot of experiences.
Well, and what they would tell me is that, for example, in Sharia, it even describes like you can keep a whip on the wall and you can use that to beat your wife under certain circumstances, and different levels of beating for different levels of offenses. And of course, I would have these conversations with them because I would say, you can't hit your wife, and they would say, no, I can't. It's in the Quran, and I would say, but it's wrong, and you still can't do it. And they'd be like, well, I just hit her a little bit.
Allah says they can.
Yeah, I just hit her a little bit.
Problem.
Okay, so this is a very basic thing here that is in opposition to U.S. culture and norms and freedoms, in fact, across the Western world. And I remember when I interviewed after Afghanistan, after the Taliban fell and the new government was in place, I interviewed the minister for women. And she told me flat out in the interview, I'll never forget this, she said more than 80% of Afghan women are beaten by their husbands. More than 80%. Which is one of the things that prompted the conversations I would have with my team and my friends, and that was, do you beat your wife? That became a thing I would throw in at the end of every interview in Afghanistan with any guy. I'd be like, do you beat your wife? And once I was in the valley up in the north, and with all these tribal elders, they came from all of a very famous valley, very well known, never been conquered, and I was with an ODA team of Green Berets, and they said to me, they introduced me, and of course they were welcome. And, do you have any questions? I was like, I was not expecting to talk, so I did not have any questions. So they were like, no, ask a question. So I said, okay, do you beat your wives? They all said yes. Like 60 or 70 tribal elders in Afghanistan, and they were holding up their sticks and showing me the sticks that they used to beat them with. And, this was not controversial in that valley,
right.
The concept of it. And the honesty of it. So, and the reason I raise this is that I think people read a lot of stuff online, and they're scared to ask questions. They're scared to talk about certain things. But to understand what Sharia law really can be at times, and to understand how brutal it is, I do think that's an important part of the conversation. That's why I want to show this video that I mentioned about halala, where a man who's divorced his wife now wants to remarry her, but she has to have sex with another man. That's what the gentleman who posted this video, how he described it. And he says that they often choose older men, which would be for obvious reasons. Some people may find this hard to watch. I will say that it should come with a warning. I found it hard to watch. In fact, it's haunted me. So there's the wife, supposedly, as reported. She's the wife, and he's just divorced her. Now, it appears he wants, what the guy says is that he wants to marry her again, so now she's got to have sex with this guy. I hate how you can hear the children in the background, but anyway. Yeah, and that's it.
Well, I mean, that's a real part of Islamic law. that concept that in order for you to remarry your wife, that woman has to marry someone else, have sex with them, divorce them, and then she can remarry you. And you just have to look at, like, for the women in America that stand up and defend Islam, I mean, just how divorced from reality can you be? The brutality, not just against women, against humanity. I mean, there's a 1,400-year track record of Islam. What did Christianity bring to the world? I don't know. Marriage, universities, medicine. What did Islam, bring to the world? Killing, rape, enslavement. Who ran the? I love when my friends want to talk about well, America had slaves too. Yeah, and who was running the slave trade? Muslims in Africa. How about that? Did you know that? No. Just pass them a little history. And by the way, we got rid of slavery here.
Well, the Persians,
because the ideal for how America was supposed to be, the Declaration, the weight of the Declaration forced the obliteration of slavery here in America. But Sharia ensures it will always continue because it's a part of Sharia.
Okay, but the Persians would argue that they brought, many advancements to humanity and libraries and,
they will argue that. I'm sure they will.
And they will also say that Christians
they
also
invented
killed.
Exclamation point and, algebra and all these other things. What you'll find is most of the things they claim credit for were non-Muslims under the Islamic State working those things. And that's,
well, they would also argue that Christians were also brutal. That wasn't just the Muslims that were brutal in battle.
Right, but so for instance, if Christians in battle did something that violated the reason that they were fighting under just war, for instance, many of them, we have the records, they were excommunicated.
Well, the Romans would put people, line the roads with human beings, and then like them.
Those weren't Christians, meaning the Romans.
Well, what about people will say, what about the Crusades?
Well, I love that. So here's
I had
a great
a feeling
example.
you might.
When I was in Iowa, speaking, and right in the front row, there were the jihadis and the communists sitting almost alternate next to each other.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful because always comes up.
Yeah.
Well, what about the Crusades? I'm like, ma'am, thank you for asking. What about the Crusades? Tell me, what do you know about the Crusades? Well, it's Christians. But what do you know? Okay, so let me just ask you, when did the Crusades begin? She wasn't even within 5 centuries. Not even within 5 centuries. And I said, who ordered the first crusade? And why did they do it? No clue. And I'm like, see, this is beautiful because you're so ignorant and you're just spouting talking points from your Muslim Brotherhood colleagues who are sitting right there in the back of the room because I knew who they were. But you're just regurgitating it. But let's dissect this. First crusade was ordered by Pope Urban in 1095. Well, when did the first jihad start? Well, I don't know, 490 plus years earlier. And so at the request of Christians who were being killed, unable to get to the Holy Land, Jerusalem, we had a crusade. Yes. And if you look at the crusade battle map, again, thanks to my buddy Bill Warner, that's available online, starting in the early 600s, the first jihad, 622, and going forward to today, consistent jihad. And you look at that little 160-some year time of very small number of crusade battles. That's it. And yet they make the two equal, just like they say, like you were talking about earlier, this thing is the same. It's not the same. So when individuals who call themselves Christians do things that are evil and contrary to Christian doctrine, that's not a different version of Islam or of Christianity. That's counter. And the Holy See excommunicated soldiers that did things like stealing, rape, killing innocent people. That should be on the record. But just because someone does something that's evil, whether they're punished for it or not, doesn't reflect Christian doctrine, right? The two great commandments still stand. Love God, love neighbor.
Love your enemies.
Love your enemies. That concept, there's no concept like that in Islam. The doctrine of Islam is the purpose of Islam is to wage war against non-Muslims to establish a global Islamic state under Sharia. Period. That's it.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Here's a message from our partner, Dr. Kirk Elliott. Something big is happening in the markets. So big, I have to bring your attention to it. On February 3rd this year, President Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signed an executive order to create a sovereign wealth fund, committing to monetizing the assets of the U.S. balance sheet. Meanwhile, the Bank of England is running out of gold. So desperate, they're paying 16% a month just to borrow it. And where is all that gold going? Right here to the U.S., with a drastic increase in metal shipments to CME Comics vaults. Is President Trump preparing to repatriate and monetize America's gold? Elon Musk and former Congressman Ron Paul, through Doge, are planning an audit of the gold in Fort Knox. Major news for the silver market: 80% of all refinery-bound silver comes from Mexico. With American silver refineries already facing a 3-month backlog, this could send prices soaring overnight. President Trump is the catalyst for these historic economy-shifting events. As he says, we are entering the golden age of America. Take advantage of Trump's golden age by owning the asset that has the potential to back our currency. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals today to reposition your portfolio into gold and silver at 720-605-3900 or visit laralogangold.com. Okay, so to that end, how bad is it now in the United States? Let's start with, you mentioned John Brennan. What's John Brennan's relationship to this?
Well, I was the first one to report that while he was the head of the CIA, the station chief, in Saudi Arabia, John Brennan said the Shahada in the presence of Mubahith, Saudi intelligence, and other government officials.
And the Shahada, you have to explain that.
So the Shahada is what takes a non-Muslim to becoming a Muslim. So you've got some problems there. So people argued with me, first of all, how do you know this? Well, because I have people that were there that are aware of it. And I was attacked internationally on CNN and others that say I'm claiming, I was attacked for claiming, Alan Combs, when we interviewed on Fox News, attacked me. Oh, you've claimed, all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, okay. And I actually, why I enjoyed Alan Combs is because he was a hippie liberal. He wasn't a commie liberal. So even though on camera he had that friction, I really liked him a lot because he was a soft-hearted individual. He wasn't a communist. And so those are the kind of people, even when we had friction, I had, at least he was standing up for what he believed. He was not, I would tell him, well, Alan, that's not true, but it's okay. Anyway, later, another station chief from the CIA retired, and then he came out publicly and said it was widely known that John Brennan had converted to Islam in the CIA at headquarters. Widely known. He's like, I knew that while I was still in, so I'm not sure what the controversy is. And now nobody cares. But at the time, I took a pretty good beating for it. And I thought the reason it was important is because he converted to Islam, number one, which I could argue as the station chief of the CIA is problematic. More importantly, more importantly, he did it in front of Saudi intelligence officers, which looks to me to be a recruitment, which means he was likely a Saudi asset. Now,
Well, you at least have to ask that question.
but he was never asked because, as you know, my feeling on this, we don't have a functional counterintelligence apparatus in the United States. I would argue we haven't had one for a long time, but it certainly has never been, what it should be.
We have an entire, I won't say their name because it gets people hot under the collar, but we have an entire military unit whose job is counterintelligence. I mean, people think counterintelligence is the FBI. That's not the real U.S. counterintelligence. It's become that. But when I saw people like Peter Strzok and that at the FBI counterintelligence doing what they were doing, I was like, well, we don't have to worry because we've got those other guys and they're surely doing their job. I mean, over the years I've encountered, let's just put it that way, I've encountered people that work in that world and many, the ones I know are real patriots. But,
yes,
when Russia collusion started, I was like, oh, well, those boys have got this, right? Because they know this is crap. And I knew it when I read the Steele dossier. I knew it was paid for disinformation. You could tell. They didn't have any firsthand sources just to start with, right? It wasn't, and then the whole way it was handled and the way it was described, the people who created it admitted it was unverifiable because they knew it was a lie.
Right.
They made it up.
But that didn't stop the FBI director and the deputy director for sending it to the FISA court and approving it.
Correct.
And then getting reauthorization for it.
Or stop Brennan bringing it to the White House and bringing it to Congress, attaching it to the bottom of his report, or stop John McCain, by the way, from marching it over to the FBI because he had a duty. I mean, please, what a duty as a traitor. So, I've watched over the years thinking, okay, so those guys, they got this, right? They must be doing something. But you saw Russia collusion go on and on and on throughout the Trump years, and it just got worse and worse and worse with one lie after another, the Magnitsky Act and the Trump Tower meeting, all these faked manufactured crises. I mean, you saw it on, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but on January 6th. And so, I mean, there's just a plethora of examples that you can use. And these guys have been absent. So I know why I'm concerned about this. But tell me why you are.
Well, because the nature of the war is primarily subversive. It's the counterintelligence. So it's total war. So the communist movement, the Islamic movement, their understanding of warfare is total war. Jihad is not just swords, guns, bombs. That's the smaller part of it, just like the communists. The bigger part of the total war is espionage, counterintelligence, propaganda, economic warfare, psychological operations, subverting the key institutions, education, religious institutions, the media, the government, the political institutions, the security institutions.
Cultural.
And through that, and again, for them, one of the big cultural penetrations is of the religious institutions. That's all part of their warfare. And for them, for both movements, everything is, if it advances their movement, it's game. There is nothing's out of bounds. Well, in America, most Americans, I believe, are very naive. I would argue most generals, most colonels, very naive about warfare. They don't understand. If you understand, for instance, the Quranic concept of war, then you understand their defeat mechanism. What will make them stop?
What?
Brutal defeat. And my argument has been, since, I would argue I started this in 2004, really pushing this, is if we do not, certainly by 2005, if we do not deal with them now, the level of violence we will have to inflict will be so much greater. In other words, we had many more options in 2004 than we do today. Today, violence is almost the last option that we are going to need. We are going to have to bring to bear so much violence against the Islamic world. And I don't believe America has very many leaders. I believe there are a lot of warriors who understand it because they've dealt with it, that are willing to do the kind of violence that's going to have to be brought to actually win the war.
But violence alone is not going to do it, is it?
No, because you have to not only vanquish the enemy, and this brings up the point. Right now, Americans, again, just like in 2016, 17, they're complacent. They're like, oh, Mr. Trump's in office. We can sit back and watch the show.
And do nothing.
Yeah, and do nothing. Well, those people that believe that are fools and suicidal, I believe. Because while I believe, and this is my professional opinion, what is happening right now is important to restore the republic economically, financially, what they're doing, securing borders, vetting out and tossing out people that are treasonous, and hopefully they'll, once we get, God willing, get back the Department of Justice that's functional, if it's possible, then start prosecuting traitors and criminally pursuing these things. But this war is not going to be won in the courts alone. All those things are good. No war in the history of mankind has ever been won by changing issues and fixing policies. Wars are won by identifying and vanquishing enemies. And so far, that hasn't been done in the last 5 administrations.
So what do you see now in the Trump administration?
As far as going after the enemies, yes, pursuing enemies who are inside the system, they seem to be identifying them and getting them out of the system. But they are not recognizing, one, this is a real war with identifiable enemies who have doctrine, strategy, lines of operation, and massive networks. Those networks need to be dismantled. Now, hard to dismantle them without a functional DOJ, but when you actually recognize you're in a real war with hostile foreign powers using U.S.-based proxies to wage those wars, like the entire prominent Islamic network and there are thousands of chapters here. I mean, the Muslim Student Association alone has over 1,000 chapters on U.S. colleges and universities. And then all of the offshoots from that, Students for Justice in Palestine, Hamas, Engage Palestine, Hamas, all these other groups that come with many names. Once you recognize you're at war and you legally acknowledge that, the Constitution unleashes all kinds of powers that we can wage against these organizations, including violence that we can bring to bear on those people. We can shut them down. We can take their money. We can lock up all of their leaders. I mean, we can seize their property. All these things that we should be doing right now, the adversary knows this. But now that they have people in the Trump administration that are being treated as allies, well, now they're trying to figure out, well, maybe we don't need to go violent yet.
So, okay, wait. Who are the people within the Trump administration?
Well, you just named the ambassador to Kuwait.
Who is that?
Amir Ghalib. He's a jihadi. You've got the new U.S. attorney for Los Angeles, Asaili. He's Muslim Brotherhood. You had Sophia Farouk, who just in the last week, thanks to they reached out to me, Cobb County, and I provided them with information. But they had already had people do great work at the ground level.
Who is she?
So she was running for the GOP chair for Cobb County, Georgia, and she's the granddaughter of Maududi, who was arguably one of the 2 or 3 most prominent Muslim Brotherhood Islamic scholars of the entire 20th century, who created Jamaat-e-Islami. That was her grandfather, who she says she lauds, and she identifies as a Muslim, who lauds her jihadi grandfather. And all these people, including Georgian, what was the group? Georgia Veterans for Making America Great, or some group. I can't remember the name of them. They were all behind her, and she lost, but she lost. It wasn't by a wide margin. And this is, when you have a jihadi like that, why? Because she's attractive, because she's a conservative Republican. Why? Because she said so.
But what if she is? How do you know she's not just because of her grandfather?
because she lauds him and she does it. But you also look at, it's easy to say, oh, you're the leader of this mosque or this organization that we know is hostile. Why? Because of who owns you, because of the history of how it was formed, all that. But you have a whole line of effort. And this comes to what you and I talked about off air, is the modus operandi of the Islamic movement. Because of that, we know their modus operandi. We know how they work. So you take that template and you put it on someone like a Saleh or Sophia Farouk, and they line up perfectly. That's the problem. You don't know. You might not know 100%, and that's the counterintelligence. Ask someone who's actually worked counterintelligence. I don't know. Maybe you know someone, right, who's actually worked in that field and has done it and operated against counterintelligence officers from foreign countries and from hostile organizations. You rarely know 100%. So what you do is you're like, yeah, there's a high degree of certainty, or a pretty good certainty, that they are an agent of this hostile foreign powers. So now that I know that, we need to figure a way to box them out, or we need to operate against them. So can I say with her, I would say 100%, because she's not only, she lines up right with that. People have challenged me, and people that I know and respect, they're like, there's no way this guy, this guy's a nice guy. I'm like, I've been saying since 2003 or 4, when you're in a room with Muslims, the nicest guy in the room is the most dangerous guy. John, how do you know that? Because they publish doctrine that explains and trains them how to approach the non-Muslim community. Always quietly, nice, soft language. The nicest guy is always the most dangerous guy. But I will also say, because we have an intelligence network, and because I was the first guy in the government to teach on this stuff, because I created the first training program in the government, because myself and my colleague, who Rich Higgins recruited out of the Joint Chiefs working for General Pace when he was the chairman, and we were the only two on the planet to predict and brief to members of Congress that there was about to be, in the next 60 and 90 days, this was in October, November 2010, a Muslim Brotherhood revolution that would begin in Egypt, and it would spread, and it would go to places like Syria, and it wouldn't go because of the Iranian influence. We laid it all out, and it has transpired exactly how Steve Coughlin and I briefed it. Why? Not because, I always say Steve Coughlin probably is one of the most smartest guys in the country, but I'm just a jarhead. I'm just a regular old, gumshoe FBI investigator, case agent. I was never any highfalutin leader in the FBI. I just, followed the facts, followed where the facts led. And the reality is I've got bona fides, right? People, I can point to it, and others can point to it for me. And the reason I'm able to do that is because when you understand the network, their modus operandi, and the doctrine they follow, now add on to that the intelligence network that we have here in the United States. We know that they keep shifting and shifting. So when they were, the whole moderate Muslim movement was a complete fraud. So all these people, it wasn't a fraud, it was part of their operation, line of operation.
It's like moderate Taliban.
Yeah.
Moderate Taliban, you still believe in killing women just for showing up their face? Oh yeah,
right.
They don't exist.
Right. So the Zuhdi Jassers, the Raheel Rajas, the Kanta Ahmeds, all these people, they are part of the Islamic movement. The
Bonnie Rubens.
Yeah, they're all part of the Islamic movement.
Zolman Khalilzad.
And this may be a point to take a deep breath and explain this to your audience, because I think this is one of the most important aspects of their modus operandi. From a military or intelligence background, it's a splinter operation. So you are the perfect person to share with your audiences, because you've had all these practical experiences of watching suit-wearing guys and asking them, so do you agree with Osama bin Laden? Well, yeah, of course I agree with what he was fighting for. I just think his tactics and the timing of them, they were too soon or whatever, but of course I agree with that. Are you okay with killing women for, oh, of course, right? But you're so nice and you wear a suit. We hear it all the time from pastors, from national security advisors. Oh, no, you don't know, John. They're really nice. They're helping us. Oh, are they? Let's dissect that. And of course, when you dissect it, they're not helping you. They're regurgitating information they already knew you had and serving it up to you in a way that you thought it was them helping you. But anyway, let's back. So splinter operation, here's how it works. After 9/11, the leaders of known Hamas Muslim Brotherhood organizations, CARE, ISNA, ICNA, Muslim American Society, Muslim Student Associations, they show up on TV in suits, and CNN is kissing their butts, and later Fox, and they say, yeah, those guys, and of course it's easy when you're showing some Taliban guy or Al-Qaeda guy on the battlefield with an AK-40, oh, those guys, they're horrible.
Yeah.
And we reject and denounce all terrorism, which actually they do, because under Sharia, terrorism is killing a Muslim without right. Let me say that again. Under Islamic law, terrorism is killing a Muslim without right. So they do reject terrorism. But who are the terrorists under Sharia? The American and British troops. They're terrorists because they're killing Muslims without right under Sharia. When can you kill a Muslim under Sharia? Well, when they leave Islam, when they commit adultery. You see the point? But you have to understand Sharia to know this.
Because you don't really know what they're saying.
Right. They are literally, you have to translate English to English through the filter of Sharia. So when they say, we want human rights for everyone, and we want to end terrorism, they do. They want to end Muslims being killed for reasons outside of Sharia, and they want human rights. Well, they legally, to the world, said human rights in the Cairo Declaration to the whole world, served to the UN in 1993, the entire Muslim world at the head of state and king level. They said, we understand human rights to mean Sharia.
So, John.
So you understand? So let me finish this thought here.
Okay.
So suit-wearing guys calling the Taliban and Al-Qaeda bad, so we look to them. And then as it becomes more and more well-known that these are Hamas Muslim Brotherhood organizations, in walk the moderate Muslims. Oh, the Zuhdi Jassers testifying before Congress. Yeah, the Muslim Brotherhood's bad. CARE is bad. And for people that want to accuse me of, you don't understand Zuhdi Jasser, well, I met with Zuhdi Jasser.
Who's Zuhdi Jasser?
Zuhdi Jasser. Oh, he's, some would argue, the leading moderate Muslim in America. And I knew him when he was still having a psychological breakdown because he grew up with, if his story is true, and I believe it is, about how his parents raised him, they taught him to be a good human being, to be a decent citizen.
Yeah.
But what they didn't teach him was what Islam. So he thought Islam was what his parents taught, which wasn't. And so when he got older and now he started to speak out, and he had Muslim leaders coming to him like, hey, Zuhdi. And I can remember the day in a coffee shop, in a Starbucks in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., with a very senior government official, me and Zuhdi. And we had this conversation. The point of this was Zuhdi ended it by looking at me and going, well, you understand Islam better than I do. And I'm like, that's right. That's why you shouldn't be talking about it, because you're confusing people that don't understand. Well, then he took a very different tact. Okay, different story. And then he publicly, on Glenn Beck's show, attacked me and some of my colleagues like Robert Spencer and Pam Geller and others. So he's batting for the other team. But he's continuing this. So now you have the moderates calling out CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood. And so now he looks like, right, splintered off. Then we go to where we are now. Now it's the conservative Republicans waving the flag, talking about tax cuts and defending the Declaration and the Constitution. People like Sophia Farouk, Asaili, and others. Now, when they first tried to go down that road There was an organization, Muslims for America. Their website was red, white, and blue. It was a mom and her 2 sons and daughter. And man, they were red, white, and blue. We're Republicans in Colorado, and they started at the state level. And I was already working in Colorado. So senior leaders came to me and they're like, what do you think? I'm like, it's an op, and they're bad. And of course, I gave all the information to the people that need to know. They started to chip away. And so how did these Muslims respond? Well, by kind of going full jihad, revealing they were actually not only Democrat, but they're actually Sharia adherent Muslims. So now what are they doing? Now they're full-blown now they're taking the full tack. So around the United States, at the local and state level, they are running Muslims for public office, wearing red, white, and blue, flying the flag, and it is but they're openly Muslim, and 100%. You find me one that's not bad. And people argue. People that I know, they're like, no, you don't understand. I know this guy. I'm like, and how do you know? Well, because he told me. Well, that's unprofessional. That's an unprofessional assessment.
What about people like Ilan?
So the guy who robbed the bank told you he didn't do it?
Yeah.
So you get back in your car and you go back to the office, he didn't do it. How do you know? Well, he said he didn't.
What about people like Ilan Omar?
Oh, she's flat out overt. I mean, her dad ran intelligence for Somalia. Come on. I mean, she is a full-blown overt op. There's nothing covert about her.
What about the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison?
He's Hamas.
He's Hamas?
Yeah.
I know you've said that, right, publicly. You've said he's a Hamas leader. He denies it.
Oh, well, is he a Hamas leader? Let me say he works with the senior Hamas leadership in the United States and has private meetings with them. So for anybody that wants complete clarity, how's that? You do your own assessment, what that means to you. And why is he having private, off-the-books meetings with Hamas leaders in the United States? Well, I would argue, based on the information I have, he's doing it to strategize with them. And there's no evidence he's not.
Well, and I will say, first I want to correct myself. I'm not sure that he's actually denied what you've said, but he has said that you're like a poison and
he's
a
called
snake
me
oil salesman.
Snake oil salesman, I think.
Yes,
yeah.
But I didn't find anywhere where he actually denied what you said. However, on the other side of that, I would say, when you say, why would you be having senior meetings with Hamas leaders? Well, there are instances, especially in U.S. intelligence and whatever, where you might meet with your adversaries, right?
However, to be clear, he doesn't report these.
Right.
If I'm a member of Congress and I'm going to meet with a leader of a designated terrorist organization,
I have to make a report.
I have to make a report. Those reports have not been filed.
And
just for clarity.
And even prior to that, he has a history with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes, he does. He speaks at their conferences. He overtly supports them. And again, you can go to, well, so have other people. That's right. And cases should be open against these people. And here's my argument. Even if you want to say, well, John, you have to understand, this is all I've done for 24 years. So when I say it, I understand there are people like, you can't just blurt that out. I can, because I have the background. However, what I am saying is, if you want to look at all the leaders, the attorney generals for the last 20 years, the national security advisors, the presidents and vice presidents, if you want to argue, and I'm talking about the ones that have overtly supported the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic movement by speaking at their conferences, even when they've been advised not to, because the evidence demonstrates who they are. And they've still done it, and they provide official support from their official offices as Attorney General. Right. That is a violation of the law. And all I'm saying is, at a bare minimum, a case should be open against them. That case should include, at some point, interviewing them, should include looking at all of their communications, looking at their bank records, doing the things that we do in basic investigations to see exactly how they're supporting these organizations.
But instead,
not just overtly, but instead,
they
nothing.
get security clearances.
Yep.
They get access to classified information.
Yep.
And if they're in Congress, like Keith Ellison, they get appointed to committees like the Armed Services Committee.
That's right. And have access to even different layers of security information. And now he's the Attorney General of Minnesota.
And by the way, it is worth noting that he was appointed after George Floyd's death or around that time. And he was...
I'd have to look at the timeline there, but...
Oh, no, I remember it very well.
But I will just say...
We can look it up.
Yeah, I will just say, to kind of back up where you're going with this, is that the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't, and the Islamic movement, they don't do willy-nilly. So when he moved from being a member of Congress to Attorney General, we saw that as that's another notch in where they felt the movement was. They are constantly moving their people into places. And it doesn't mean they have complete 100% control. Sometimes things will happen that they didn't plan for. The thing that Americans, I think, another key thing Americans need to understand, which hopefully you understand the deviousness, the very how well coordinated these movements are and their activities, is that they don't do willy-nilly, but they are keeping the Islamic movement in their lane and moving in the direction where they're going, which is a complete revolution to overthrow the constitutional republic. And they, because of the fact that most of the administrations since President Clinton's to today have pretty much given them whatever they wanted, they don't see it as there's a lot to be done right now. And there is an argument within the Islamic community, the leadership of the Brotherhood and the Muslim citizens across the country, especially in the key cities, which quite frankly are most major American cities, is do we wait or do we go violent now? Like it's a lot. There's an argument among the Muslim community. Hey, let's just start flying the Hamas and black flag over our mosques. What are we waiting for? And the Brotherhood is kind of saying, wait, because we're making advancements even under the Trump administration. So those are the American people need to understand. These are the discussions that they're having
about when to go from covert to overt.
Yeah.
Okay, but so maybe you can lay out for me who are the other key figures currently in positions of power and authority who you have solid evidence are working to overthrow the U.S. government?
So the leaders of all those organizations, the key of which the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, which was created in 2014 is when they stood up. And then once that was stood up, again, you're talking about markers, milestones along the way. Then in 2017, the Muslim Brotherhood, in the form of the International Institute for Islamic Thought, which is the strategy center for the Muslim Brotherhood in North America, they made a formal agreement with the DNet, which was a formal network built here in the United States. The term DNet is actually, that's like using the term Department of State. The DNet is the part of the Turkish government that is an official, constitutionally mandated, cabinet-level part of the Turkish government whose primary purpose is to ensure Sharia compliance in the Turkish government. The DNet was built here, and Erdogan and Obama met when the cornerstone of the DNet was laid in Atlanta, Maryland. That was a $100+ million mosque that was stood up that is essentially an official Turkish government entity that was built without the legal and governmental approvals that we would normally give an embassy, but we didn't. The leader of the DNet, the equivalent of the Secretary of State, but for the DNet, remember, their purpose is to ensure Sharia compliance. He came after all this, after the formal agreement between the IIIT, Muslim Brotherhood Strategy Center, and the DNet representative, assigned a memorandum of understanding. And And then the leader of the DNet came and spoke at the actual physical location in Maryland. My assessment, and several of my colleagues completely agree, is that that was the formal turnover from the Hamas wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, officially turning over leadership of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood to Turkey, to Erdogan. So that's 2017. My assessment is that when the caliphate is declared, he'll be the caliph. Turkey is absolutely lining up across the world everything they need to reestablish the previous Ottoman Empire, like physically on the ground, building what they need to build in conjunction with nation states and other entities. And when they believe they're ready, they'll do that. The purpose of me sharing this is you asked me about the leadership. So the leadership of the U.S. DNet, the leadership of the U.S. CMO, Osama Jamal, arguably one of the top leaders now, Nihad Awad, the leader of Council on American Islamic Relations, is the Hamas leader in the United States. Muzammil Siddiqui, the arguably number one as far as guiding forces for the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood. But the leadership of the Islamic Circle of North America, the Islamic Society of North America, Muslim American Society, MGAGE are a major player now because they're being treated by the U.S. government and by others as a suit-wearing, friendly Islamic organization. That's a Hamas organization, like CARA's. All the leadership of the Students for Justice in Palestine, and really pretty much the entire Islamic leadership in Chicago. And for your viewers that don't know, the hub for Hamas is in Chicago. I like to tell people the number 2 is Dallas, Texas. And when I brief that to Texas leadership, they fall out of their chairs. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, more jihadi attacks in Texas than any other state. The largest terrorism financing trial in American history, Dallas. Richardson was the Holy Land Foundation. By the way, it was the largest Islamic charity in America, and it was a terrorist organization, Hamas. More jihadi attacks, the hub for Hamas, number 2, Dallas. So these are all investigative clues that Texas has a problem, but...
well, Dallas is is making news right now, not strictly Dallas, but nearby in Plano, Texas.
So that's great.
Right, where they're...
building Epic City.
Well, they already have the East Plano Islamic Center, which has a massive mosque, a mega mosque, I think they call it, with an Islamic school and so on, where they make Palestinian flags in the kindergarten class and teach about Palestine and everything, and where the
teach jihad.
Yes, and where the imam, right, Qadir,
Yasser Qadi.
Yes. Yasser Qadi, where he has, there's a lot of videos of him talking about Sharia and talking about political and cultural revolution and talking about being the center, the largest mosque in North America. And there's a lot of footage you can find easily online inside the Islamic school, the little boys doing the Quranic rote learning and the little girls in full hijab and so on. And this is backing the construction of the Epic City, which is this mega city, Islamic mega city that's planned. You can see in the videos this vast plan with all the homes for 1,000 families and
400 plus acres and
ranches and everything else. And this has been in development for years. Right now it's in the news. And so there's multiple investigations that have been launched, right?
Just in the immediate time period, yes.
Yeah, by the Attorney General.
Because citizens rose up and created quite a ruckus, and because citizens, some of whom have been trained by me and my organization about how to understand this in the broader threat matrix, not just it's a bunch of Muslims who want to build a community. What's the big deal? And those people, who I think have really taken heroic action have spent years, certainly the last 5+ years, educating local and state officials, educating state legislators slowly over time and getting them to understand, many of whom have been very resistant to this. But now, for instance, one of the state legislators, this whole epic city is in her district. And she's like, what's going on? They're like, yeah, remember when we came to talk to you 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, and you snubbed us now? So I'm actually like, whatever it takes. Now that your eyes are open, what are you willing to do?
So can you describe, for the average person out there, I mean, the Islamic leaders involved in this are very careful about their words. They say this is, about unity, and this shows how we, Muslim communities can settle in North America, and
right.
They use diversity. We'll have a diverse community and all the rest of it. But from your point of view, with what you know, when you see a massive development like this in rural Texas, which is, if their plan is carried out, that will be transformed into what is an Islamic city, right? I mean, they say that anyone is welcome. Well, but then can you imagine them allowing a synagogue to be built, allowing Jewish families to settle there?
Right. No, they won't. That's not part of the plan.
So what are they really building?
Well, so you just used the word settle. And I think that is, perfect. When you read the Muslim Brotherhood's strategic plan that was discovered in a FBI raid in 2004, it was actually the squad I was on at the time, in Annandale, Virginia, at the home of, August 2006, in the home of Ismail el-Barassi, who was a senior Hamas operative in the United States, who worked directly for Musa Abu Marzouk, who was the leader of Hamas here at the time, who is now number 2 or 3 for Hamas. He's the political bureau chief for Hamas, and he's been in the news since the October 7th attacks in Israel. But of course, we didn't keep him in custody years ago when we had him. But anyway, in that raid, we found archives of the Muslim Brotherhood in North America. It was a treasure trove. One of these documents is the strategic plan. And they say that the settlement, and they use the word settlement, is a civilization jihadist process. And that they are waging a grand jihad to destroy Western civilization from within by their hands, meaning our hands, and the hands of the believers, meaning the Muslims, to establish an Islamic State under Sharia, obviously. And this is important to understand. What I said earlier, in order to understand these little things that are going on, and these big things like building an Islamic community, you have to understand it in the perspective of their doctrine and their strategy and how they do what they do. For them, this is civilization jihad. This is the subversion of our entire system it's like termites in a house, so that when they do violence, they don't need a wrecking ball, because the entire structure of the house has been undermined so that you can get a 10-year-old kid to just push on it and the whole thing crumbles. So when they actually do violence, it won't require the level of violence that people think it will. So that's how you have to understand this epic city. It is the subversion of our system. It is a part of a war, and therefore it has to be viewed as hostile.
Is it a command and control center, do you think?
It will be.
Command and
they
control
already
node?
have EPIC. The East Plano Islamic Center already is. The U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations already is. The Islamic Society of North America was. The International Institute for Islamic Thought already is. They already have these mosques, and maybe we need to go back to helping your listeners and viewers understand what a mosque is. A mosque is not.
People
Muslim,
think of it as being like a church or a synagogue.
It is not that. And this is not me saying this. Again, when people say, well, this is your opinion. No, it's not. My understanding of Sharia isn't my opinion. If you only use Islamic sources, and that's why I love using textbooks for 10, 11, 12-year-olds in Europe, Canada, the United States.
Because it's so simple.
Because it's right there. Mm-hmm. Don't listen to me. Anybody, right? Yeah. I can hand it to your team. Here, you go teach it. Just read out of it. That's all you got to do. So what's confusing? What's amazing is an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old Muslim student can get it, but the President of the United States, Clinton, Bush, they don't get it. These really smart people, Condoleezza Rice, right? Colin Powell doesn't get it. John Kerry, Hillary Clinton. Now, you can make an argument that some of those people knew they were lying. It doesn't matter. The effect is the same. What you're doing is advancing a hostile campaign in a war to destroy the United States, which means you're standing in the enemy camp, just letting go of mortar rounds in the tube that are landing on people like you and me.
And some of those
who are actually speaking the truth, explaining this.
Some of those people, right, may just want to be, if you're a Muslim who has immigrated or come here to the United States, either to fleeing war or asylum or whatever, or, you just came for better opportunities, you feel most comfortable around your own people, right? So for some of them, it's like, well, yeah, I want my kids to go to an Islamic school. There's Jewish schools. Jewish people want their kids to. There's Christian schools. Christians want their kids to. And so those people provide a really good cover for what's going on underneath, right? Because when journalists show up and interview them, they're like, well, I just want to be able to practice my faith and honor my customs and that kind of thing. And I love America and I believe in the Constitution and, we're not trying to separate ourselves from American society. We just want to maintain our traditions, which, by the way, people all over the world do. Italians and Irish and, well, not the Irish anymore, but you know what I mean?
Right.
So these are the arguments, and they say, you with this jihad nonsense, this is conspiracy. This is not true. You hate Muslims, and you're just and you're spreading this poison because you're anti-Islamic. You have no proof of what you say, and our right to practice our religion is protected by the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah,
I'm a naturalized citizen.
Yeah, so that's great. So it's why I wrote this book, which is if you just read it, it simply quotes Islamic law. It's not me. It's not my personal opinion, number one. And it's interesting that the journalists, because I've had these conversations with journalists, even those right here in Dallas, sent them. Here's who they are. Here's the evidence from the largest terrorism financing trial. And yet you're writing articles about these organizations and their leaders, and you're slandering me. And they're like, oh, we didn't know this. Nothing. And I have gotten retractions when I've gotten attorneys, my attorney,
involved
to call and say, boom, they've retracted.
They back down. But
nobody pays attention to the retractions.
But also what they don't do is they don't then investigate that.
Nope.
And report on that.
Because they're advanced, because they're part of the problem. They're part of this. They are advancing the Islamic movement. You can name, my goodness, literally on a hand, Paul Sperry. We're running out of names now. And then a lot of now independent folks that have started their own podcasts and blogs and really, Gateway Pundit and all these. Why can't I go to ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox and get it? You won't hear that anywhere. And what you'll hear is the opposite of the truth. You'll hear the propaganda being pushed by the Muslim Brotherhood and the jihadi movement here, 100% of the time.
What role did Obama play?
Wow, big question. So let me just, to do that, let me finish one thought. When you mentioned like someone saying, we want to follow the Constitution, we want to do that. Okay, but I want to go back to when they say it's just like, you want your Christian thing, we want our Muslim thing. Number one, nowhere in Islamic doctrine does it say Islam is a religion, merely a religion. It's a complete way of life governed by Sharia. It's a totalitarian system governed by Sharia. Christianity says, Christianity has doctrine, right? And the guiding principles are love God, love neighbor. No such principle exists in Islam. The principle in Islam is, it is the duty of Muslims to wage war against non-Muslim, to establish an Islamic state under Sharia, period. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. So what do you know, when people say, oh my goodness, this Muslim American Society mosque in Philadelphia, we've uncovered videos where the children are singing about chopping the heads off of infidels. And I'm like, I got interviewed by like, all of a sudden these national news reporters, can you believe it? What do you expect them to teach at a mosque? They're teaching Islam. That's part of Islam. Now oh my God. And did that mosque get shut down? No.
Can we get that video?
Was there an FBI investigation? No. Did the Philadelphia police open an investigation? No. You know, it's a news story and then it's gone. And I'll tell you, because of the nature of this war, right? Because of the fact that they have thousands of organizations, these movements mirror insurgencies here in the United States. And in a counterinsurgency, the war has to be won at the local level. It is nice to have a federal government that hopefully does something productive and holds back the bad guys, so at the local level you can wage the war. Maybe they push resources, but for 30 years what the federal government has been doing is coming after people like me and citizens that we train and local officials that I've never even met that are standing up and speaking truth.
Well, it also doesn't help when the federal government hands an entire state to an Islamic terrorist who absolutely
Minnesota,
100% support.
Dearborn, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Oh, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We created a terrorist superstate.
Yeah.
Which has more Islamic terrorist groups than any other place on earth.
And the U.S. government, the State Department, wrote the Constitution for Afghanistan, and by the way, Iraq, which made Sharia the law of the land.
Yeah.
Why? Because our Islamic advisors, also called jihadis in suits, told us that doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. That's their culture. Well, what you did is you handed, 2005, handed on a silver platter Osama bin Laden exactly what they were fighting for in Afghanistan. We did that.
Which is the headquarters of the caliphate globally.
That is what the Muslim Brotherhood's document says, their strategy. That's civilization jihad by our hand. They get our leaders to do their bidding for them, and we've been doing it through Clinton, through Bush, through Obama, even through Trump, through Biden. It has just been one massive failure after another.
Okay, so here's a distinction then that I believe is important to make. Yes, it's happened throughout Republican and Democrat administrations. I would argue that it's happening now under the Trump administration for very different reasons.
Agreed.
Failure of counterintelligence.
Yes.
Right? And also you're fighting
no idea how to vet people.
Right. And you're fighting a war on a million fronts.
Yep.
Right? Plus, your entire administration is packed with people who are subverting you.
Yes.
And to date, no one has been held accountable for that. So those who did it the first time around survived to do it again.
Yep.
Right? And so that's very different to the Obama administration.
Who was actively providing resources of the U.S. government, money, official, using the office of Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General to literally, the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch, went to these Muslim Brotherhood things. Jay Johnson as DHS Secretary, using their official, the color of their office to back terrorists.
Yep. And what about the Biden administration actually handing a country over to these terrorists on their timeline? So I agree with you with that. On their timeline, by the way.
It's a fair assessment.
And in addition to that, you look at the situation that you have now. I mean, when Trump assassinated Qasem Soleimani of Iran, of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Iran had been the number one state sponsor of terrorism worldwide for more than 15 years.
Yep.
I mean, recognized by Republican and Democrat administrations, and Qasem Soleimani was, terrorist manager-in-chief, and they were complaining when Trump had him killed.
Yep.
And you come to today where the Trump administration, I think this is perhaps the clearest example of the distinction, is that one of the first things that Trump did when he took office was order for the $40 million payments from USAID and State Department, right? U.S. taxpayer money that would go into the Taliban to stop.
Right.
And they haven't. They haven't stopped.
Right.
So you have people within these organizations that are actively, intentionally, knowingly subverting the President of the United States.
Right.
And they're
on behalf of our enemies.
And on behalf of known terrorists, which is a violation of what material support to terrorists is still a crime.
That's a start.
That's
so
a crime.
Many.
I mean, there's so many laws that are being violated, it's hard to count. And yet, still, they're so under siege, the Trump administration, that, I mean, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State's not doing anything about it that we know of.
No.
Haven't seen any action taken.
And yet he's taking, so this is the thing. I said this earlier. There are so many things the Trump administration is doing imagine, and I will say, I talked to some people on the inside, and who follow me on Twitter, and they're like, you're being a little harsh of the administration. He's like, we haven't even been in 60 days, and we're getting a lot done. I said, I agree. But you're fighting the 5 meter target when literally the armies are getting a raid on battlefronts, getting ready to unleash just utter warfare on us. So you have to, whether you think you can do it right now, you have got to be able to do these things while at the same time preparing. First of all, that begins with understanding the threat, recognizing who the enemy is and what all of their components are, and then recognizing, okay, we have to build mission-tailored assaults on these guys with priority targets. And that's what you got to do.
Some people will say, well, that didn't work before. We've that in Afghanistan. We did that in Iraq.
No, I'm talking, we didn't. Because first of all, I go back to what I said about having all the attorneys in combat. What were they doing in there?
They were there to tell you no. Right.
And I will tell you, of all the, briefings that I've held with, I spent plenty of time with Mattis, who refused to.
Another traitor,
he
General
was
Mattis.
Very disappointing, especially as a Marine. But others.
Former Secretary of Defense, I have to say, under the first Trump administration.
Yeah. We have to understand that you have to unleash the full power of the government with people and leaders that actually understand what they're up against. And right now, there's nobody. I have yet to see anybody. You have a few people in the administration that are, get it somewhat, but they're not in positions to do what they need to do, or they're on the outside.
People will just say, oh, John, come on. You're just advocating for war. You're another warmonger. We did this whole war against, the Islamists before. It ended in abject failure and disaster.
We didn't. This is the point. If you understand Sharia, then you have to fight the war based on their defeat mechanism. So that would have meant after 9/11, arresting Prince Bandar
of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and executing him because he was paying the Saudi intelligence officer who was handling 9/11. We have plenty of evidence against him, and I worked those cases. This is where Paul Sperry wrote those cases, and guys I was working with at State Department and the CIA who Paul interviewed for some of these articles, massive articles where he laid out what we were doing. And the investigation always went right to the front door of the Saudi embassy, and we were shut down by State Department from doing anything further.
Because the Bush administration was protecting the Saudis. That was true.
That's my assessment.
That's not conspiracy.
That's not conspiracy theory. So we should have obliterated obliterated the Saudis. We should have gone to war against Iran. In Afghanistan, what should we have done? Kill as many Al-Qaeda, destroy their bases, and gotten out.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Don't loiter on the
objective.
objective.
If you're going to go to Iraq, kill all the jihadis there, and get out. Seize Saudi oil and use that to pay for your war effort, because second to Iran, Saudi Arabia is funding the war effort. Now it's Qatar, but they were never friendly. UAE, Turkey, Pakistan, these are our enemies. These are not friendlies. This is, you want to go to war, go to their power centers. I mean, imagine in World War II, we say, hey, can we put one of our most important bases in Berlin? And the Nazis are like, sure. Yeah, go ahead. We put CENTCOM in Qatar.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
That shows you that State Department, multiple secretaries of defense, our 4-star general, just clueless. And my experience of briefing.
And traitors.
And
cowards. And by the way, I mean, what about Pakistan? I mean, are you kidding me? Just, every time you send a U.S., official over there, let's roll out another Al-Qaeda leader, because apparently we have no shortage of them.
Right. Who directly gave support to Al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan to help move them? ISI. I mean, these are not...
Yeah, the Pakistani intelligence. By the way, who moved Al-Qaeda through and kept Al-Qaeda safe gave them safe haven? Iran.
Yeah.
And then when, I never forget when the General Caldwell in Iraq...
And this isn't like we're just learning this in the last few years.
No.
We knew this back in 2000, before 9/11.
I'm nobody. Okay, if I can know this, I have no access to U.S. intelligence.
Right.
I have no security clearance. I don't have, an army behind me.
Right.
I'm not sort of hobnobbing in the halls of power in Washington, D.C. If I could figure it out, anybody could figure it out.
That's right.
Like you said earlier, it's not even hard. One of the biggest things you got to do is listen, pay attention to what they say. So when Al-Qaeda says, okay, here's a list of targets, and they publish this in Inspire magazine, they say, and right up top there are, homosexuals. Okay, then they hit a homosexual nightclub in Florida. And everybody says, oh no, this is not a terrorist attack. I'm sorry. The United Nations just convened on a homosexuality issue for the first time in its history. And that was because jihadists were throwing homosexuals off buildings in Fallujah.
Yep.
And because they're hunting them in Syria. You've got homosexual activists who made it to Turkey who are talking about how they're murdering people for being gay. Yep. But nobody wants to talk about that.
That's normative Islam.
And now apparently every leftist gay person in America thinks that Hamas and Al-Qaeda are the best things in sliced bread. Yep. Oh, apparently they missed the videos when they were being tossed off buildings the way Saddam Hussein used to do it.
Those are just the radicals.
Just the radicals. Yeah, of course. Of course.
This is where we find ourselves. It really is. It's so delusional that everything that's, in my opinion, everything, not just what we're talking about, whether we're talking about food, whether we're talking about vaccines, whether we're talking about fill in the blank issue. I mean, the lid has been blown off so many different issues where we realize some of it was nefarious and cunning and devious, and some of it was our leaders were a combination of everything you just said. I've met leaders. I mean, I've briefed people, and I just walk away going, wow, that person, my kitchen table has higher IQ than that person. So some of it's that. Some of it is this terrible combination of arrogance and ignorance. Some of it is self-serving. They want the 7 or 8 figure salary. So they want Qatar to hire them. They want Saudi Arabia to hire. They want to be a consultant. Oh. Hey, if you're the you're running an entire program at the CIA, man, you're looking at millions of dollars a year. And if you start talking and going after these guys, Man, no way.
Oh, I remember going when I was doing a piece with President Musharraf in Pakistan and going to an event at the National Defense University there. And there's all these U.S. generals sitting in the front row.
Yep.
And where did they go when they retired? Working as consultants and advisors for the National Defense University in Pakistan.
They
Oh, by
should
the
all
way,
be
where
in
did we
jail.
find
Yep.
Osama bin Laden? Where
Yep.
was he? Oh, yeah. And where were they running the Shura Council, out of Quetta, the Quetta Shura? Where were they running the war? I mean, I was on those battlefields. I watched American soldiers be killed. I watched them be maimed. I watched them die.
Yeah.
And none of that had to happen because the very same people that were leading them in battle were making deals with our enemies. And the same thing at the State Department, by the way, not just the military leaders, the political leaders, the spy agencies, the intelligence agencies, the ones who know it all. They know so much more than I could ever know.
Yeah. Can you imagine that the 4-star Marine general in charge in Afghanistan when that whole mess happened and that, not only the attack, but the quote unquote withdrawal.
The 13...
And he said, Taliban is our allies in this. They're helping provide security.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
that is a traitor.
Yeah.
That is someone who...
But that went all the way up to Lloyd Austin,
Sure.
Anthony Blinken,
Yep.
Joe Biden. I mean, I think it was Colonel Howard, the Delta Force commander at the time. That's another POS, right? And he hates it when I name him. They got their little deep state, mouthpiece propaganda puppet, Jennifer, whatever her name is from Fox News, the Pentagon correspondent, that horrible woman who took a run to his defense on air because I was on Fox at the time, calling him out because they left behind unbelievable assets and they were right there at the gates of the airport. And they said no. And I was working that in real time. So there's nothing these people can say to me, I know what the truth was. And they're all traitors on some fake terrorist timeline.
Right.
We didn't even I've seen videos that I can't share, but of, just masses of weapons that were left behind at the U.S. Embassy, all of the burn down protocols that were tossed out of the window, U.S. surveillance assets that made it out of the country to countries like Uzbekistan that were then under agreement between U.S. leaders and the terrorists inside of Afghanistan that we weeks before had been our enemy, now our new friends, that we actually violated U.S. law and transferred those assets back over the border, back into Afghanistan, into the waiting arms, so that they could create a terrorist superstate and give terrorists from Chechnya and beyond new identities, new biometrics, everything else. Because, by the way, we left all that behind too. Access to the biometric database.
Yep.
So that they could go and alter their identities, issue them with new passports. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So
it is such to call it a catastrophic criminal action by our leaders it seems too mild. I mean, it's treacherous, it's treasonous, and these people should pay. Jail, I think, would be too nice for them. The law allows for capital punishment for treason.
Well, treason is a crime against humanity, right? I mean, there's no statute of limitations on it.
Not that I'm aware. Nope.
Speaking of which, that reminds me, we never answered the question on Obama.
Okay.
So what role did he play and how significant was it?
Well, he certainly advanced their movement. I mean, and he was not very covert about it. I mean, he held meetings in the White House with senior Muslim Brotherhood leaders in North America. With leaders from the Islamic Society of North America. And I don't know if you remember Muslim Public Affairs Council, Muslim American Society, groups like that. And
could you argue, well, these are American organizations and this is about outreach and we don't want division in our country?
But this is after they were convicted of being Muslim Brotherhood, or in the case of the Islamic Society of North America, the evidence in the largest terrorism trial revealed that ISNA, which was not convicted in that case, but the evidence demonstrated they're a Muslim Brotherhood group that directly funds Hamas.
Which is material support to a terrorist organization. Okay, one of the reasons I ask about Obama is because I was in Cairo early in his first administration when he made his big speech to the Islamic world. What was the significance of that?
Well, I think it was huge because, as we were talking about before we came on air, I mean, Mr. Obama, that speech at Al-Azhar, the highest authority in Sunni Islam for legal jurisprudence, leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in the crowd, and the propaganda and I'll use the phrase material support for the global Islamic movement that provided them. Unbelievable. I mean, that was the green light. I'm the President of the United States and I am completely on board with you. That was our assessment from an information warfare perspective. That's exactly what he did. He just green-lighted the Islamic movement. And what did we see during his tenure as president? Is it accelerated? I mean, we have plenty of intelligence, both overseas and currently. I mean, I have colleagues of mine that went over to Egypt and met with leaders that were fighting the Muslim Brotherhood, including leaders in the government after the Muslim Brotherhood leadership, Morsi, got pushed out. This is they talked about the impact of Mr. Obama doing that. He basically just gave the U.S. government's seal of approval on the Muslim Brotherhood's Islamic movement, not only there, but here in the United States. And then all the actions they took after that.
Such as?
In Benghazi, the response to Benghazi, the response to jihadi attacks in and outside the United States, defending them. Islam doesn't teach that. This isn't that. And we're going to bring in these organizations that we know are bad to respond. We're going to put them on CNN, let them offer a public response. I mean, it's so well coordinated, and it was coordinated in many cases through the White House. Right?
Well, one of the things that stuck out to me at the time that I didn't really believe was when it was reported that Obama had told the head of NASA, who was the first African American ever to lead that agency, he was an astronaut, former astronaut, Charlie Bolden. It was reported that Obama had said to him that you should not emphasize America's achievements in space. You should not be pushing America. You should be elevating the Arab world. And, for years, I would hear that, people would raise that, and I would say, well, that's, who knows? I doubt that's true. I mean, it was inconceivable to me that an American president might actually do that. So years later, when I was doing a 60 Minutes story about space, and I had the opportunity to sit down and interview Charlie Bolden. After the interview, we were walking and talking and chatting and all that. I said, Charlie, I got to ask you something. I'm just curious. This was reported that you had this meeting with Obama when he first, not long after he first came into office, and this is what he told you. And Charlie Bolden said, oh yeah, absolutely. That's 100% what he told me. Right. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I said, I'm not aware of a whole lot of space programs in the Arab world. Are there any? And he said, I think the Emirates may have developed a very small one since then, but he said, no, no significant presence that I'm aware of. I said, did that make any sense to you? And he said, no, it really didn't. But he said, that's absolutely what he told me.
Yeah.
What the hell? What was that about?
Well, that's right along with everything else he was doing, right? Promoting the Islamic movement, denigrating the United States, right? You didn't build that, right? We're a nation of racists and everything else. That was Mr. Obama's message.
So where are the hotspots across America right now? Because one of them is Dallas, Plano, Texas.
Texas in general.
Texas in general? Wow.
I assess that, and my team assesses Houston as the single worst city in America for the joint Islamic Communist movement is Houston. But other really bad areas, especially for the jihad, but also the communist support, the Dearborn, Michigan area,
Michigan.
Twin Cities, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. New York City, parts of LA.
Paterson, New Jersey?
Yeah. So that area around Paterson. It's pretty bad in the triangle area of like Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Nashville, Charlotte. Did I say Tampa?
No.
But even like Kansas City, Kansas, Wichita's pretty bad. Plainfield, Indiana is the home to ISNA. So they have a base there. Chicago, I think I mentioned them earlier, horrible. And I don't just mean Chicago. I mean pretty much draw a 35-mile radius around there. And the jihadi community is very thick and growing. And they are raising a ton of money internally. Ton of money to expand what they're doing there.
What's a ton of money?
Like in a weekend, it's not unusual for them to raise several $1 million just to expand one thing they're working on.
Where's the money coming from?
From the Muslim community, the U.S. Muslim, because you got, these people are, engineers, doctors. I mean, they have money and they're putting it back into the Islamic movement.
And USAID.
Well, yeah. I mean, now that's just, again, another piece of it that we know about. But I'll also say they're getting grants from the U.S. government. I mean, I remember one grant, when I was in touch with some people in John Kelly's office when he was working for Mr. Trump and DHS.
Another traitor. He
stopped one grant to the Muslim Public Affairs Council, which is a Muslim Brotherhood group, for over $500,000. Just that's one grant. I mean, that's a major Muslim Brotherhood entity. That's a major propaganda arm for them. But Phoenix is a huge hub for not only Brotherhood for Al-Qaeda, and has been, that's been since the 80s. My goodness, you could go around Denver.
But you're not just talking about Muslim populations.
No, I'm talking about the jihadi networks in those areas. San Diego's pretty significant. Seattle, Portland. Not much. There's a network in South Dakota, but it's pretty small because they have very low. I've done some work up there. They have a very low tolerance for any of that. South Dakota may be the best state in the country, poised. I would argue it's probably number one on my list for poised to kind of keep the whole communist Islamic movement out, and they're trying to get in there. Montana and Wyoming are probably 2 and 3, but they have their problems. Montana and the state legislature, they've got some issues.
Well, it's in the.
But those would be the best. When people ask me what are the best states right now, those are probably the best for kind of defending liberty. Now, Florida is doing a lot of good proactive work, but they have a very significant jihadi network. And it's not just in one place. I mean, Tampa's a pretty strong Hamas hub, but really around the whole state, they've got a lot of issues. Atlanta is very bad. I mean, Atlanta, you can go back to the 80s when Al-Qaeda was doing recruiting in Atlanta. Abdullah Azzam was in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you're aware of some of that going around the country, talking about the jihad in Afghanistan.
Abdullah Azzam, the Palestinian philosopher, who was
legal jurist, I would say.
Legal jurist.
Right.
Who was very popular and very influential.
And worked with Osama bin Laden, helped create Al-Qaeda.
Well, Osama bin Laden took his philosophies and
his writings.
And combined his writings with Muhammad Qutb, the Qutb brothers.
Said Qutb, yeah.
Said Qutb out of Egypt. Said Qutb wrote his manifesto, Milestones. And what Osama bin Laden really understood the power of was uniting the Sunni and Shia using the Palestinian cause because it's such a powerful motivator on the Arab street. Right? So
this is great that you bring this up, and maybe this is a great place to that this conversation has come to. Is that what did Abdullah Azzam say is the basis for everything he wrote about? Sharia. What did Said Qutb say? It's all about Sharia. All about Sharia. But what they were doing is what you just said. How do you apply it to unify the Muslim community today, meaning
the Ummah worldwide.
To get the global Muslim community, the Ummah, to actually, because Sayyid Qutb was very harsh, talking about Muslims that were not adhering to Sharia.
Oh, well, I mean, I've pointed out forever to people that on a daily basis, Islamic jihadists kill more Muslims than anyone else.
Because they're not adhering to Sharia.
And so to make this that it's simply a case of you don't, like each other or you hate each other, no, that's not it at all.
Sharia.
In fact, the number one target list is other Muslims who don't adhere to their ideology.
Yeah, that's right. And this is interesting because I did a whole, it's on my website, johnguandolo.com, but I did a whole video series that I think is a total of almost 6 hours called It's All About Sharia. Because once you and we talk about Qutb, talk about Abdullah Azzam, when you understand that in the 20th century and now the 21st century, that's the basis for all of its. Maududi was all about Sharia, the one whose granddaughter tried to be the Cobb County GOP chair. The milestones, Abdullah Azzam's writings, and these others, these real powerhouses in the Muslim Brotherhood Islamic movement, but the basis is all Sharia. But what they're doing is they're talking about, okay, but how do we unify here? How do we do? And that's where they can really make things happen. And you just mentioned, I love that. See, this is why I just think, because of your experiences, you came to this because you were right there. Like, well, wait a minute. No, there's not a moderate version of this, right? Because the nice guys are like, oh no, we still have to kill our children. But we'll sit there and have tea with you and we won't kill you, right? Lara, we're not going to kill you, so pretty nice of us. Oh, thanks. But they still, Sharia is at the core of their entire belief system. And so we must, in the West, make the mistake of thinking because someone's being nice to us in the moment that they're somehow trustworthy or they're somehow on our side. I mean, that's just, it's ludicrous. And this is, I think, the message, what we're talking about today. These movements are hostile. The key players are all hostile. The key Islamic organizations in the United States and North America are all hostile. And I say it very frequently on X. Hey, name one national U.S. Islamic organization not hostile, $1,000 cash I'll give you. And literally what comes back is nobody, they're like, there isn't one, is there? Like, so citizens are starting to realize, no, there's not one.
So you get answers like that and death threats, right?
Yeah. Less death threats today, and the reason is because they think they're about to win. They believe they're on the verge of kind of rolling the final phase out, 0 hour, and finishing the plan. So they're not paying as much attention to my colleagues and I or you.
Well, also you've been sort of, put in your conspiracy box, right? In your anti-Islamophobic box.
Yeah.
And so they can say, oh, well, that guy, he just hates Muslims.
Yeah, they can say that. Interesting, like you and I were talking about, it's funny how my phone is ringing more now than it's ever been ringing before. And this is just in the last few months. Because again, nobody wants to buy a fire extinguisher until their front door's on fire, right? But now that there are communities around the United States that are scared, that literally guys that are Al-Qaeda, are Hamas, are in their neighborhood like, yeah, we're taking over. And there's nothing you're going to do about it.
Well, is there that? I know
that's a foul.
It's all
right. That's because nobody knew we were going to go 4 hours or whatever it's been since we've been chatting.
Just about 3 hours.
Yeah, okay. But, well, I mean, I'm starting to say this more and more now, but you have to come back because there's a whole lot we didn't talk about. We didn't even touch Syria, and other things. But
is there something going on in Syria?
The new moderate leader
right.
in Syria who's busy getting rid of all the Christians, the Alawites.
He wears a tie, so he must be nice.
He must be nice. He's grown up since he was a member of Al-Qaeda.
2 weeks ago.
I mean, it's not funny, but you almost do.
You have to laugh. I mean, people ask me, how do you do it? And obviously, that alarm is because it's 3:00, it's holy hour. So we remember the moment Jesus died on the cross for us. Good reminder. So I don't think we can do this if we're not anchored in our faith. But man, we have to remember that we have to live life, right? I love music. I love
you sent me some of your songs. I was pretty impressed.
I love stand-up comedy. I love, we have to enjoy life. We have to keep a sense of humor. I have colleagues of mine that have been doing this a long time, and they about lose their minds. And I'm like, I used to get that way, and I realized, number one, I'm just a messenger. This isn't because I'm smarter than someone else, or I've just had unique experiences that I can share. I just offer what I can to people, and when they reject it, I'm like, okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings. When people are like, I think this about you, I'm like, okay. I'm okay with who I am, right? And if you want to call me names, get in line. Just Google me, and you could make a career out of just reading the crap that's been printed of me, everybody from Time Magazine and BBC to everyone else. And I just don't care, because I don't serve them. That's not who I work for. And so I think once you get that, you got to have a sense of humor. I mean, it's so ludicrous what's going on when you realize how either incompetent, traitorous, criminally negligent, whatever our leaders have been. You realize, so once again, as it was 250 years ago, it's back to the American people to fix it. And what I see, like in Texas, citizens are fixing it, and they're going to fix it. And thank goodness in Texas, they've been able to get the attention of the governor and attorney general, who, good on them, are opening investigations and have publicly said, in the case of the governor, you will not finish this epic city. It's not happening. And God bless them for it. And God bless the people working at the local level. Yeah. I mean, they're the heroes, because they're having to it is such a slog just getting local attorneys and local elected officials and state legislators and people in the governor's and attorney general's office to finally go, oh my goodness, we get
finally,
it.
After years.
Because, for instance, Yasser Qadi, the spokesman for this whole thing.
For this epic
city
mosque.
He's the chairman of the Fee Council in North America that I talked about earlier. That's the leading Islamic legal organization to ensure everything the movement does here in North America is Sharia compliant. That's the guy. That's an organization identified by the evidence in the Holy Land Foundation as a Muslim Brotherhood group.
Which, by the way, this mega mosque that he's building is about 4 hours from here, right? 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah, about 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
From
where we're sitting right now.
A little east, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I know that we have to. Stop talking now. Although I still have a lot more questions, and I guess what would be the thing that you would want to leave people with? Because yes, people are standing up now, but most people don't even recognize what you're talking about.
So over my career, I started at the national level, working with national level leaders, thinking that many of them good men and women. And I did brief a lot of good men and women, the generals, the members of Congress, former FBI, CIA directors. And then they asked, well, what would be your strategy to deal with it? And here it is on paper. And I was still idealistic enough to think that then they could make that a reality. And they, remember the people that I worked with, that I educated, the Louis Gomerts, the Michelle Bachmans, the Trent Franks, they got beaten up by their own party, by Republican leaders. right? Not the Democrats. And the Democrats jumped on them, but it was the Republican leaders who came after them.
Who gave the sort of the kill shot, right?
Yep.
Because you can get attacked by the other side and survive it, but not when you get attacked by your own.
No, it was that. And so we took it down to the state level and working with governors and attorney generals. And I worked with some good people, but none of them were willing to take the actions necessary to deal with the Islamic movement, the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and the Iranian Hezbollah movement in their state, even though there's plenty of state laws to do it.
Well, didn't the Trump administration just invite a Hezbollah member to the inauguration?
Yes, they did.
And
the person who made that happen, I still don't know who actually made that happen. I have my guesses. Not fired. Nobody's fired. Nobody's
they fixed it
publicly humiliated
because you and other people called them out, and then they realized they'd made a terrible mistake.
But they were shocked to know he was a Hezbollah guy.
How could you not know?
How do you not know? This is the problem. So then we took it to the local level, and what I found when I moved here to Texas 8 years ago, I built a program out of the realization. I already knew this when I was in the FBI, that we had to engage the local level because this mimicked an insurgency. It does. So it's at the local level you're going to get the most
among the population
traction.
Well, which is in fact, if you listen to the imam from the mosque in Plano,
Yasser
Plano,
Qadi.
yes, if you listen to Yasser Qadi, he says local politics, national action, which is actually a phrase that General Flynn
That's right.
used, right, and uses a lot.
Because both understand the war in which we're engaged.
Yes, and he also says, if you tell 10 people, and they tell 10 people, and they tell 10 people, that's how we will bring about a political and cultural revolution.
That's right. So to the kind of the culmination of your question, my answer to your question is, I developed a training program. We have training programs for police that's focused on local and state police. We have training programs for prosecutors, although we encourage them to go to the law enforcement. We have all kinds of training, but the most important one, our Into Action program, trains citizens at the county level how to, again, identify the hostile networks and literally map out good guys and bad guys in your county and create a strategy, a plan, how to lawfully flush the bad guys out of your community. And it's been very effective.
So how can people get hold of you? Or, if there's ordinary people out there or law enforcement, there's a motivated sheriff who's heard this and wants to.
JohnGuandolo.com.
Okay.
And I'm on, J Guandolo and string of numbers, 54271, something like that on Twitter or on X. But this is like my third Twitter account because I got bounced so many times. Fourth Twitter account or X account. But now they're leaving me alone. I think maybe speaking truth is no longer against the law. But I really encourage people, we win or lose the whole war at the local level. What an administration like the Trump administration can do is they can not only hold the bad guys back, but they can provide resources to states and local communities to smash these cockroaches like they deserve. We got to put our heel on them. But you can do it lawfully, right? You can lawfully flush bad people out of your community. Look, there are 100 ways, and I can give you examples all day long, but I can tell you I've worked with communities where because the business leaders got smart, the local county councils got smart, and people came in, Muslims came in like, I'm going to buy this land, and they're like, really, you are? And because they were already radar on, they just did their research. And they're like, this is who's backing this guy. We know they're bad. No thanks. Like, I'll sue you. They're like, sue away. We would love discovery on you. And then they go away. All it takes is standing up. And then what happens? Great example is Maricopa County, Arizona. So over a period of several years, finally got that community through the county prosecutor to bring me and the team in to train. In the end, hundreds and hundreds of police officers across state, but also in and around Phoenix. And then working with their state legislators to get a law to have basically a state terrorism law so that when a jihadi came and said, hey, I have some really important information. I need deputies to come down and talk to me. And a couple come down, he starts throwing rocks at him. And of course, this is all on body cam. And then he pulls out a knife, screams Allahu Akbar, and charges them, and they shoot him. He lived, so we need some marksmanship training. But anyway, and of course, the county attorney, they knew what they had. And they asked the FBI, do you want to take it? And they're like, why would we take it? And they're like, thank you very much. They charge him with state terrorism charges because they knew, because the local sheriff was like, we're going to charge him with assault on an officer. And the Maricopa County prosecutor, who, by the way, now sits on the Arizona Supreme Court, and just a great human being, he said, no, this is not merely assault. This is an act of terrorism. Here's why we know. And they charge him with a state terrorism thing and put the guy in jail for some real good time. And here's the other thing is, as soon as they did that, the FBI was like, hey, we want in on that. And they were like,
oh, of course they did.
Nope.
Because now they want to take control over it.
Yeah, they want to take credit.
Yeah, because
That's
what the FBI is doing, and we can close on this, what the FBI is doing, and I've looked at law enforcement, bulletins for years, is they've been ignoring and enabling the Islamic terrorist threat to grow while creating a non-existent white supremacist threat.
That's the violent extremist threat.
Right.
We talked about earlier.
Literally going in, creating chat rooms, going in there as fake white supremacists, planting ideas and thoughts, and then taking screenshots of that. That's done by them, and putting it in their daily terrorism bulletins, and dwarfing any other reporting, right? Where you have real threats, but it's drowning in these fake threats that they've created a good degree of the time, in order to build a false narrative that the greatest existential threat to the United States of America are the white American men who believe in the Constitution.
Can I put a cherry on top of that?
Yes,
maybe that's a good
by all means.
So two things. I'm the only one, my team is the only one in the country doing this training. And just two little vignettes, and people can use it for however they want. So doing the law enforcement training in Louisiana several years ago, about 75, 80 police officers and detectives, and we actually had a prosecutor in there, and a police chief. And on day 2, I'm up there like laying out, this is what they're doing, this is how they do it. And this police chief looks at me and he's like, he's not even like, excuse me, I love this guy. But he's like, he looks to the two guys sitting next to him on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. And he says, why in the hell have you two not told us about any of this? Mm-hmm. And in front of all their colleagues, they're like, we've never heard any of this. And the whole class kind of, and then they're like, uh-oh. And this, to the second point, is when I finished my law enforcement training, I always ask 2 questions. I've been doing this for years. How many of you knew this information before you came in here? 0 hands. 100% of the time. Nobody. And this includes people that are federal agents, state investigative agencies, local police, people that have been on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. 0. Second question, how many of you believe this is critical to protecting your community? All the hands go up. And what they're shocked at is that whether this was in 2011, 15, 18, or today, they're like, how is it we don't know this? Like, we go to all these classes, we work with the FBI, nobody's ever told them this. I'm like, well, that's because I was the guy who ran the only 2 programs in the government, and then they shut it down. Moved me out of the counterterrorism division because I was, a problem.
What year was that?
So the program was 2006, and then we did the second one at the Park Police in December 2006, and then January 2007. And then they moved me out of the counterterrorism division during 2007. So I spent the last year and a half of my time in the Bureau on a surveillance unit, which was great. My friends used to joke, so they moved you out of counterterrorism and they gave you a laptop and a phone in a job that you have a lot of free time in. I'm like, they're like, they don't know you very well, dude. So all my buddies were like, get on it. But I was also told, You can't send any email or have any phone call related to that stuff, or you're going to be punished. Now, of course,
they siloed you.
Yeah, they tried to. But of course, I was getting literally, calls would come in from different government agencies asking me to come train. And then I'd get crapped on by FBI headquarters. I'm like, I can't control who calls you. But I share the earlier stuff about the lack of understanding and the value of this training, which I encourage every community should have it. I mean, we've been trying to scale this up for years, but most Americans are like, why do we need that? Well, you need it because we're in a war and nobody's doing anything about it, or very, very, very little about it. It is time to put freedom back on the offensive where it belongs. And American citizens are the best ones to do it because their BS meter is the most sensitive of anybody, right? I mean, and get your local police, if you have a good local police, good sheriff's, get them involved. I've worked with communities across country and they are doing great work and they're doing it quietly, but they are punting these turds out of their community, these commies and jihadis. And there are ways to do it. There are just ways to make people know you're not welcome here. And they're legal. You don't got all these people like, it's time to revolt. I'm like, maybe we'll come to that, God forbid, but there's plenty you can do.
Legally and constitutionally.
Legally. It might be a little devious. It might not be nice, but it's lawful and you can do it. And you can tell them, hey, you know what? I know you think you're being nice, but you're not welcome here. We don't want you here. So here's what we've done, right? Your business, whatever it is, right? We're not renewing your lease. How about that?
Well, there you have it.
There's so many ways to do it. Thanks for having me.
There you have it. Thank you so much, John. If anybody has questions, wants to know more, wants to get involved in their own communities, johnguandolo.com, right?
Yes.
I know you've got that book that you showed a lot. You've also got Raising a Jihadi Generation. We are definitely going to have you back. There is a lot more to this subject. Thank you for watching. This is the part that I really suck at, which is where I say, please go to laralogan.com, like, share, subscribe, do all of those things. Help support us if you can so we can keep this going. We are going to be hitting the road, going rogue in the Panama Canal and the Darien Gap, looking at the road to invade America that is being built out there and whatever else we find. So thank you for joining us and see you on the next episode.